Special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have.
No one will be cancelled.
Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock. Today, smart motorways are scrapped. The government pulls the plug on building any more, but the AA says we need to ditch the ones we already have. We will keep backing you. The Foreign Secretary meets with the G7 with the promise to keep supporting Ukraine.
How stuffed is your freezer? We're ditching fresh food and spending our cash in the frozen aisle instead. More royal revelations as the King invites thousands of army and health staff into Buckingham Palace for a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And remembering Bowel Babe, nearly a year on, we'll give you the lowdown on a new documentary about Dame Deborah James.
It's Sunday, the 16th of April. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Now, this is one we want to kick off with, and we want your thoughts on this, please. gbviews at gbnews.uk, because plans for new smart motorways are on the scrap heap after a major government climb down.
Well, the controversial setup has been blamed for numerous deaths as hard shoulders are turned into extra lanes at busy times. But the ones we already have won't be going anywhere, at least for now. But the AA is demanding that those ones are scrapped immediately.
Yeah, I mean, they have been blamed for a number of deaths. The idea being, of course, that some people don't realise when it's a hard shoulder and when it's not. So they're scooting down the hard shoulder at 60 or 70 miles an hour. Someone's broken down in it and they just go into the back of them, basically. I mean, they're terrifying. To be fair to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak did say, when he was campaigning to be leader, he did say he'd get rid of smart motorways. And also in this, they've acknowledged that there are concerns and a lack of driver confidence in smart motorways, but it's also a big money-saving venture.
Well, yes, it's estimated it's going to save taxpayers an estimated £1 billion and, as you say, Stephen, reduce the risk of crashes as well. But I think there is the issue of trust as well, isn't there? And it's how much drivers actually trusted smart motorways in the first place. I mean, I certainly didn't.
No.
When I'm driving on motorways, they'd say, move into the hard shoulder. I never would. Simply for that reason that I wouldn't trust that the gantry messaging would be updated if there were to be a crash.
Yeah. It's worrying. And I say, there's a stretch when I drive home every day. There's a stretch which is smart motorway. Sometimes it's a lane, sometimes it's a hard shoulder. And almost every day, when it's a hard shoulder, I see someone driving down it.
Really?
Almost every day.
But that's the thing. If you get used to then using the hard shoulder, if you are driving at rush hour, you would then use it, without thinking.
So they're meant to be a safety measure, but they're making things more dangerous. So let us know what you think. Are you happy with what's been done? Do you want more to be done in this? As the AA is saying, we want, the AA wants proper hard shoulders on every motorway.
Yep. Should we scrap the smart motorways that we already have in this country? That's what the AA wants. Let us know what you think of that. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, after more than a year of killing in Ukraine, just how long will the international community keep supporting Kyiv? Well, the Foreign Secretary is proving our mettle as he makes more commitments at a G7 meeting in Japan today.
But it comes as there's huge concern over what China is planning for Taiwan. Well, joining us now is the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Brilliant to have you with us in the studio,
morning.
Robert. Good morning
Yes.
to you. So James Cleverly's message is going to be quite clear, isn't it, at this meeting? It's going to be, we are going to keep backing Ukraine.
I think that Britain is now becoming, certainly in the European region, if I can put it like that, the leader in saying that they will support Ukraine, because there is a very difficult decision point coming up in Ukraine, as we know, as the weather gets better, and it has been very snowy until quite recently in some parts, that the offensive is going to come. We know it's going to come. Almost every briefing, secret, off the record, on the record, whatever, will tell you that. And for sure, certainly Volodymyr Zelensky thinks he's got to make progress on that. What James Cleverly is saying to his fellow members of the G7, come on, keep with the programme, because we can't afford to drop the ball on supporting Zelensky now. Very quickly, can I put it that there is a very odd thing about it, because if they do dial down on supporting Zelensky now, curiously, it means that the war goes on and on and on and on for years. They can keep a low-level guerrilla war, which certainly British experts, and I think they're at the forefront on this, are saying will lead to a terrorism war. Now, a terrorism war you can't keep within borders. So you're quite right. G7, and this is where James Cleverly will lead on this, is going to face up to an actual war, Ukraine, and a potential war, Taiwan-China.
Yeah, OK, we'll come to Taiwan-China in a second, because that's obviously a very significant issue. But has there been a sense that Russia has almost been relying on a waning of support? Because this is what we're doing and what the international community is doing for Ukraine is very expensive. Mm-hmm. Right? And do they think, is Russia banking on us running out of money, in effect?
Russia is banking on us running out of will. As you rightly say, it is expensive. But in a funny way, it isn't very, very expensive. OK, you can say, and it's a big thing with some elements of the Republican Party, as you know, in the US, $80 billion. Where does most of that $80 billion go? An awful lot of it goes back into American arms and defence industries to renew necessary parts of the defence apparatus of the US. It was something that was going to happen. But we will hear more about that. Where is the end game? And you will hear divisions. By the way, on the two, Mr. Macron hasn't been helping things very much, has he?
No, that's a fair point.
There has been a shift in tone, hasn't there, from the G7 in terms of their approach to Ukraine. Last year there was pressure, really, for Ukraine to agree to end the war and a focus on peace. And now it's a focus on support for as long as they need. What do you think that shift is about?
China. Okay. It's quite clear that they had hope. And this is where I don't think Macron, forgive me, GB News, I don't think he was necessarily being malicious. But what is absolutely clear, he was incompetent. But what he was doing with China is that all roads to Putin, think Putin, lead through China to get him to talk. And at the moment, he's in a no, not listening mode, and it's really down to China. China is so preoccupied with other things that it is not prepared to move on Ukraine. But curiously, I would say China knows that it's got to move on Ukraine because it's so committed to trade, not only to the US, but to Europe. If you really start putting yourself in a bad place, in which they could over Taiwan, and massive sanctions, and they are possible, that is so damaging to China at the moment. It is still very, very dependent on US and European trade.
OK, well, if that's the case, then why has there been all this fuss over Taiwan of late? I mean, the US has sort of mobilised some of the stuff around Taiwan, haven't they? Some of their ships and what have you. There's been these fly pasts and everything that the China Air Force has been doing. I mean, they've been upping the ante.
Well, the one relates to the other. Absolutely right. Why has China been getting so antsy about it, as you say, flying over, sailing round, saying we can cut off Taiwan? I would say I know no more possibly than anything anybody can read from open source intelligence. I think it's because it's a diversion. I think China is so preoccupied with other things really not going right in the economy, things not really fully recovering in the way that they would expect from COVID. The ageing population, a big underlying structural problem, and it's something that they can focus on. And it's very much part of the Xi shtuck, you know, the package. We're going to get back Taiwan. You know, every 2 or 3 months that he mentions it. But I wonder whether they are going to push to shove and do this, because I really don't think China is spoiling for a war with the US at the moment. It's doing an awful lot of other things. Activities by submarines, looking at international cables off Malaysia and so on, which is really worrying a lot of the people we're not going to hear from with G7, like Malaysia, but particularly Vietnam. But interestingly, this time, they've invited Narendra Modi to the big summit of India, and Mr. Albanese, the not quite so new Prime Minister of Australia. They're on the case. But I think it will be dominated by the requirements at this level of what Zelensky really needs. And the one thing that these leaks has shown is that actually how pretty incompetent a lot of American thinking is about Ukraine. It's a bit of this, a bit of that, a push, you know, put one thing in, one thing out. They absolutely need air support and air defence. They will have to focus on that now.
Well, I'm so glad you raised that, because I was going to throw that at you, Robert.
Throw anything at me.
Well, this is great thing about you, Robert, is we can, and you're absolutely fantastic. But the US intelligence leaks this week. I mean, a 21-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of that, allegedly leaking those documents. But there is a real impact, isn't there, on Ukraine and the war effort there?
Can I show my age? I'm supposed not to be aged. I say absolutely ghastly. It really is. On so many aspects, as you say, Ellie, it shows the American military thinking and strategic thinking and intelligence community in such a bad light. I'm sorry, my dears. A lot of them look completely all over the place on this. And when you hear the Brits resource-starved in a way, but you hear Rishi Sunak saying, this is what we're going to up the defence budget for. We have priority because we're now, again, renewed a major player in nuclear. That will come in, by the way, at the G7 with Australia, AUKUS. So very important. We're on the front foot there. And we are going to get the materiel into Ukraine. But for the Brits, I would say that they think it's embarrassing that they've revealed that there are 50 special forces. I should think, whatever, enough special forces, probably that is a very serious underestimate of not of people being in there, but people contributing in and around Ukraine. Actually, it's shown the Brits in rather a good light. I think that we're up for it. We're really thinking our way through. And that's why Britain will go in a peculiar way as a very important representative of NATO in the G7, because the UK, with Ben Wallace as well as James Cleverly, leads a thing called the Joint Expeditionary Force. 10 members. They're people on the front line now, the new member of NATO like Finland and the Baltic countries. And they rather like the Brits doing that at the moment. I think there might be some very hard words, some very serious talking being done in Japan through this rolling thing, because Japan is in the chair for G7 this year. It is reality check time.
It's significant, though, especially, as you say, the notion of British boots on the ground. I mean, that's not what we were told, is it? So in these leaks, it's significant.
But a covert operation.
I can remember going to an occasion, it was private, in the People's Republic of Islington, where I live, N1. And the lady, who was not particularly, I think, on the left of the spectrum, said, "I hope you're not saying we've got boots on the ground." And I said, "Francis, what do you mean by boots on the ground? In fact, we'll have been training, we'll have been in and out. There are people that we have been part of a training mission now for 10, 15 years, and they would have stuck their noses in. We've had to have people on the ground to protect our mission there and to protect a lot of our aid going into Ukraine. Perhaps, you could accuse me of being a hardened old cynic, but this is absolutely realistic. I mean, what are our people on the ground doing there? They're helping Ukraine. They're helping themselves. They're saying, look, to the commanders, to the government of the UK, this is what we have to think about if we're going to be involved in this kind of modern warfare. They're actually doing stuff in the prime interests of Britain, as well as helping an ally. And that's actually what Ukraine is. It's an ally.
Yeah. Robert, good to see you, as always. Thanks very
so
much.
Thank you both. Yeah.
It is 6:14. Also today, Merseyside police say 118 people have been arrested following disruption at the Grand National. Protesters crossed the track, breaching security fences. Two glued themselves to a jump. The disruption caused a 12-minute delay to the start of the race.
Royal Mail has reached a pay deal with the Communication Workers Union. In a statement, the CWU said their executive will consider the agreement before it's voted on by members. More than 100,000 postal staff at Royal Mail held several nationwide strikes last year. Details on the agreement are expected next week.
The Health Secretary says new nurses' strikes would have a deeply concerning impact. The government under pressure to prevent the most extreme strike yet, after members of the RCN rejected the offer that was made to them. NHS nurses in emergency departments and cancer wards will take industrial action for the first time as part of this. 74% of Unison members, though, voted to accept the offer that the RCN rejected. Following protesters failing to stop the Grand National yesterday, I mean, that was the plan, 300 or so, we were told. They didn't manage to stop the Grand National, but they did disrupt it a little bit, didn't they?
They certainly did.
We've got something out on Twitter, haven't we?
Yes, we have. We're asking today, after more than 100 animal rights activists were arrested yesterday, should we ban horse racing? Is it animal cruelty or is it a great British tradition? Let us know what you think. Does it need to be banned? Do these animal rights activists have a point? Or is it something that should be celebrated?
Well, if you're wondering what to think about that, have a listen to this, because our very own Mark Dolan last night sat down with an Animal Rising spokesperson and asked, how far is the group prepared to go in the future?
I mean, how would you like to live your life?
Nature's pretty rough out there.
I know.
I don't know if you've ever seen,
Yes.
David Attenborough documentaries.
I mean, I've seen many of them, but I wonder how you would like to live your life.
Tigers aren't very woke, are they?
No, but would you like to live your life as a whipping boy for a master, trained and forced to act in ways, or would you rather take your chances as a free, independent being? Most of us want to live freely, and I understand that. That's why we have a democracy. But what we're saying is actually these animals who are forced into these races, animals, the horses, thoroughbreds, they want to run. They don't necessarily want to race. And they certainly don't want to break their necks and die, which is what happened to Hill 16 at the first fence.
Which is very,
of the
very,
race
very sad.
today.
And that certainly supports your position.
Yeah.
It was tragic today that a horse died in that race wouldn't have if there hadn't been
No,
race.
but that's the 50th horse this year in horse racing. A horse dies every other day in British horse racing, just on the tracks. And that's not even talking about in the paddocks and in the
But
the
nobody
stables.
questions your right to protest legally or indeed raise this conversation, which I've got to say has been going on for many years now. And I think there are some aspects of your argument that resonate. But the bottom line is it's the methods that my viewers and listeners will object to.
The actual evidence out there, and I don't want to get very technical, but the evidence out there is that protest, peaceful protest and civil
Which
disruption...
is not what happened today.
But it works in terms of changing public opinion over time. And actually, that's really what we need to do when we're in the middle of a climate crisis, which we are. And our treatment, our exploitation of animals is right at the centre.
By the way, we're conflating animal welfare with the climate crisis. I think that's a little bit too much for one issue.
No, I mean, you may be talking about animal welfare. We are talking about stopping harm to animals. We're not about...
Well, if that's the case, then we won't be eating meat or fish.
Let's hope not, yeah. But, I mean...
And you get to decide that as well.
No, not at all.
So you cancel the Grand National. You're stopping me having a steak or eating some wild salmon. What else are you going to do that controls my life?
I really wish I had the power to do that, and I don't.
Well, I know you do, and that's why it's scary.
But we don't. We do not, and that we do not, because if we did, we would do it. What we have is an ability to put our bodies in the way of harm, and actually the climate crisis is really harming us. Animal agriculture is, we know, one of the leading causes. It's the leading cause of deforestation, of water use, of land use. Animal agriculture is the thing that's killing the River Wye.
You have to decide if you're what you're more worried about, animal cruelty or the debatable issue of climate change. Which is it? Pick a horse. No. You can't ride both.
No, well, absolutely.
Because now you're conflating, and this will confuse the message, and I think undermine your argument.
No, because the key solution, actually, to the climate crisis that we are facing is a safer, secure
So in
food
fact,
system.
Alex, look, you're a nice man, but I think you're a rather canny politician, and you're using the Trojan horse of animal cruelty and animal welfare to get the net zero agenda in and to remove meat from the national plate and to turn us plant-based.
No.
That's the real agenda, and I've caught you red-handed. Don't even need a photo finish.
Yeah, but we're not hiding that, because I desperately care about...
Right, so will you admit then you're not worried about animal welfare? This is about a bigger agenda, which is to turn Britain plant-based.
Animal welfare is about the incremental improvements in the way that animals are treated, but they're still treated as property. I'm against animals being treated as property. I'm against them being exploited in any way.
It's fascinating.
I think it is, yeah.
I see, what I love about that is whichever side of the fence you're on, as it were,
Good.
you know, that's worth listening to.
Yeah.
Now, we've just... So that vote, in terms of the voting so far, it's only just been live a couple of minutes. 470 people have voted so far. 20% saying ban it, 80% saying keep horse racing. A few people then messaging saying, oh, I'm not really sure, neither one or the other.
Yeah, but a lot of people saying keep it, just make it safer. Perhaps look at flat racing.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, having the horses go over the hurdles. What do you call it? A hurdle? A fence?
Fence. Hurdles.
The human version.
That's the human version.
Human
but at least
equivalent.
humans volunteer to do it.
Till I really focus on the horse racing when I go to
But
the
you see,
races.
it's what I find interesting with all this thing, because as Mark rightly pointed out, that group also wants, you know, everyone to be plant-based diet and all the rest of it. Now, see, I'm not for that, despite the fact I'm not vegan, but I have been a very strict vegetarian for 45 years. It's a blooming long time.
Yeah, it is. Impressive.
But I'm not against vegans. If you want to be vegan, great. But I wouldn't try and impose that on anybody else.
Whereas that is what this rights group are saying. If they had the power to change it, to ban horse racing, to get in harm's way, they will do that. Yeah. And that's what we saw happen yesterday. And thankfully, nobody got hurt. But that is the concern, isn't it? I mean, 118 people were arrested. I think there was something like 9 people who actually made their way onto the tracks. I mean, that could have been lethal.
Well, it could have been.
It could have been a really nasty...
That's their choice, isn't it? And they're doing that for the sake of the horses. So, I don't know.
That's how strongly they feel. So clearly there is that sentiment out there. But do let us know what you think. So at the moment, what you're saying, Stephen, it was 80% say we should keep horse racing. Let us know your thoughts. Why should we keep it? And if you want to ban it, why?
Yes, GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Up next, could you live in a hotel? Well, I think it depends what kind of hotel. Well, we'll meet one family who does. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Now, you see, I like the fact that we're talking about veganism and all that and what that protester was saying to Mark Dolan last night. It raises questions, doesn't it? Our directors just said, can you have eggs if you're a vegan? Like, no. Well, you can't have milk or butter or even honey. You can't have, because that exploits bees and things.
Yeah.
I think it was a bit... look, I've got some friends who are vegan. Well, my tattoo artist actually is a vegan. And it's great and it works for them, but I just think for most people it's probably not doable.
No. I went to a wedding last week, which was totally vegan.
You had a lovely dinner, didn't you?
Well, yeah, it was a vegan dinner. We all had to eat vegan, which they wanted, and they said they didn't want any animals to die as a result of their wedding, which I understand. If that's what they, if that's what they live by, I understand why you wouldn't want to.
Yeah, but I'm vegetarian. I didn't have an entirely vegetarian menu at my wedding. It was an option if you wanted, but most people had meat.
Yeah, well, it was very funny watching everybody, because everybody was a meat eater, and just having to tuck into. The starter was hot pineapple, roasted pineapple with tomato sauce. And watching everybody tuck into that was, yes, very amusing.
But there was a lot of wastage.
I think we were all quite hungry by that point. But yes, very interesting to talk about veganism.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they wouldn't appreciate the horse racing either. It is something that divides people, that's for sure.
Anyway, have your say on that poll. GB News on Twitter, @GB News.
Yes, and we're also talking about smart motorways this morning, and there's another poll on Twitter about smart motorways and whether we should ban them entirely, because new smart motorways are being banned now. But the AA is saying it needs to go further and the existing ones need to be reversed. What do you make of that? Joe's been in touch saying, good that they're being banned, but we do need to reverse all the completed ones also.
It's what a lot of campaigners are saying, and it's what the AA is saying. Eden, though, wants to go a step further. Will they scrap dual carriageways? They're the same, 2 live lanes, no hard shoulder. Smart motorways need smart drivers, and unfortunately most aren't. Which is a fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point. I wouldn't scrap dual carriageways, though.
No.
Because though you can go 70 down a dual carriageway, most people don't.
No.
But...
And there usually is an area, isn't there, where you could pull over?
Yeah.
On a dual carriageway. It does make me very, very nervous, though, when there's not a hard shoulder on, would that be a smart motorway or a stretch of road?
Yeah,
I just think if you break down, what happens?
Well, get out your car as quickly as you can, out the passenger side.
Yeah.
Scramble over, get out, and then...
Stand far away. Yep.
Terrible. Anyway.
But we have 2 polls up on Twitter at the moment, one on horse racing and one on smart motorways. So do get your votes in, and we're going to keep you updated on the results of those as we go through the morning.
We are. Now, we all tend to think staying in a hotel is a treat. But what if you were stuck in one for a year?
Well, one family has been forced to live in a travel lodge for almost a year after being made homeless after a fire. Our London reporter Lisa Hartle reports.
A year ago, this family say they had a good life, living happily in their rented house for 16 years. But after their home was burnt down in a fire and Dad Piotr had an accident which left him unable to walk, they found themselves homeless. The council housed them in a hotel in Enfield, North London, and this is where they've been for 8 months.
We have no life here then. It's like we closed in the cage, like no access to... We have no access for the cooking, for washing, for anything. No access. Just we have access to the bed, for the shower, for hot water.
Before his accident, Piotr was a carpenter, but since his accident in April last year, he's been unable to work. Magda often works 7 days a week, but her wage is not enough for them to rent a house on the private market.
The latest we have contact with the council 2 months ago, and we don't know even who is the caseworker. When we try to contact, even not respond by the email, not respond by the...
They ignore us.
They ignore us.
They're living on dry food and the occasional takeaway because it's too expensive. They're having to pay for their laundry to be done at a local supermarket. And being in the hotel means Piotr can't receive the physiotherapy he so desperately needs.
My physiotherapy means my new life. If I got physiotherapy, I can stand up, I can walk again, I can start new life, new job. And change everything, and then I'm not gonna be. If I start working, I'm not anymore bargaining to council give me some house, some accommodation. I start work, I get myself.
The legal limit for councils to house homeless families in hotels or bed and breakfasts is 6 weeks. There are currently 1,200 families in England being housed in these places for longer than this. The government say they're working with local authorities to tackle the issue.
Government has been clear that the long-term use of bed and breakfast accommodation for families with children is inappropriate and unlawful. We will continue to work with local authorities to limit its use and are giving councils £654 million through the Homelessness Prevention Grant in 2023 to 25 to help them prevent homelessness.
An Enfield Council spokesperson said, "It is incredibly difficult for any individual and families living in emergency hotel accommodation, as the council works hard to find long-term homes. The reality, however, is that the whole of London is experiencing a housing crisis, and across London over the past year, homeless families approaching local councils for help has increased by 17.5%. Enfield Council is committed to reducing the numbers of families it places in hotels, including a new rapid rehousing hub, and is exploring all avenues, including being forced to look at placing homeless people further from home where the market is more affordable. The government's decision to not increase local housing allowance has consigned people to poorer and poorer standards of accommodation.
Everything is hard here. It's like... And we have no hope.
We lost hope.
We lost hope.
Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
It's really awful.
Really tough. Imagine losing your home in a fire and then you have to live in one little tiny room.
I mean, how do you... It's the losing of hope. It's one thing if you think, well, I can put up with this for a year because then we know we'll be in a position to sort it all out. But when they've lost hope like that, that's awful.
It's also an issue of convenience. I mean, for your food, Lisa touched on it there, but the cost of not having a kitchen means you have to buy everything and get takeaways all the time. Not only is that unhealthy, it's costly as well. We're in a cost of living crisis. Imagine having to buy all your food in. Yeah, really, really tough. Hope they get sorted as soon as possible with a home, a real home.
Something needs to be done.
Definitely.
Clearly. Look, we're coming up next for you. We're going to dig through the morning's papers with today's special guests. This is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
Let's take a look at today's front pages for you now. And the Times leads with the surgeon under investigation for 350 breast cancer deaths. The Observer says a mega strike by nurses will affect all hospitals. And the Mail leads with police foiling a plan to wreck the Grand National.
The Express this morning says the royal family risk becoming too distant from the nation. The Telegraph says smart motorways won't be built anymore. Let's go through some of those then with the editor of Spike, Tom Slater, and the writer and commentator, Candice Holdsworth. Good to see you both.
Good to see you both.
Tom, let's kick off with the Observer, shouldn't we, in this mega strike?
Yes, so this is news after the Royal College of Nurses balloted and their members rejected the pay offer which was on the table from the government, 5% pay rise, about 6% kind of one-off payment as well. There's now the prospect that there will be this mega strike, which essentially means that rather than holding votes in individual trusts, there would be one that was across the board, and as a consequence of this could lead to the industrial action being almost twice as big as it was, as we saw at the end of last year. This is something which, again, is continuing to kind of become a huge problem for the government. If anything, at one point, the government were kind of holding up the nurses' strike as one they had handled well, because it seemed like the offer was originally quite well received, at least by the leadership, but the members have rejected it. And it just shows that this particular issue really isn't going away, and that the pay offers, which are far below the real terms pay cuts that the nurses or anyone else have actually experienced over the course of the past 10, 15 years, are just not seen as good enough by those nurses, by those workers.
I think there's going to be a great concern, isn't there, about what these next strikes could mean, especially in terms of the nurses. I mean, on the 1st of May, because there's a marked escalation, isn't there? And the nurses are talking already about coming out of A&E units and critical care units. It's not something we've seen before.
Units.
And cancer units, exactly. And now we're talking about affecting all hospitals across the UK. It's a massive concern, isn't it, Candice?
It is, and I think, more and more voices are raising concerns about patient safety. I think the nurses, the head of the Royal College of Nursing has been criticised for the handling of the negotiations. Some people, I think, did feel that maybe they went in too high and set unrealistically high expectations. So when the government came in with this offer, there was no way the members were going to be satisfied with that. It was just so far below what they wanted.
Well, except the Unison members have been.
They have been. That's so interesting. Yeah, so, I mean, that's going to create a bit of disunity, I think, and that's why also they may have to escalate their strike action to put pressure on the government. It is a bit of a blow for Rishi Sunak, because I think he wanted to get this wrapped up before the election. This is going to cause problems for them.
Yeah. OK, can we have a look at smart motorways, Candice? This is in the Telegraph.
Yes.
No new ones, still keeping the old ones for now.
Yes,
anyway.
yes. So this is such a big story. So the front page of the Telegraph, Rishi Sunak's decided to no longer go ahead with, I think, about 14 new smart motorways that were due to be built after campaigning groups, road safety groups, basically said that they're not safe. And they've been linked to about 40 deaths so far. From what I know, they're very unpopular. Most motorists I know don't trust them, don't like them, don't want them. They haven't worked.
Yeah. But, I mean, is this about... I mean, he said, there needs to be driver confidence. But is this about listening to the drivers and the campaigners, or is this about saving money? Because it's saving £1 billion.
Yes, well, originally they were supposed to be a money-saving device. It was instead of building extra road, you just convert one lane into the hard shoulder. I'm not sure, actually. I think with Rishi Sunak, he does listen to the campaigning groups, and I think he does things that he thinks will be popular because of the election. I think it's the right decision. One of the mothers of a little boy who'd actually died in an accident on one of these smart motorways said she personally spoke to him and she felt like he listened and took what she said on board. So maybe that is part of it, just concern for people getting hurt on the roads.
What do you reckon, Tom, about scrapping the ones we've got altogether? Because actually, I mean, I know it's a waste of money because the money's been spent, but in terms of scrapping them, that's not actually hard to do because you just turn off the sign.
And let everyone know that, we're back to normal. And it seems like, as you say, there has been a lot of money spent on this, but at the same time, it's just become so clear that this was always a kind of too clever by half sort of solution. You see this time and time again, where even if you grab 5 people in the street and said, "Do you think this is a good idea?" they'd have probably told you no.
Yeah.
But again, the people who make these decisions think this is genius. It will save us money. It will be really dynamic and easy to use. But of course, the issues were always there. And I think whenever you do a topic on it in GBNews, whenever you see a topic on the radio, the strength of response to it tells you everything. I think about how bad an idea this was from the off.
OK, Tom, let's stay with you, shall we, in the Mirror. And this is Coronation invites NHS workers.
Yes, so this is the news about 4,000 medics as well as members of the armed forces are going to be given a kind of front row seat to the coronation. It's something which King Charles has been talking about previously, about wanting to involve particularly the NHS in the course of his big day there. But there's also naturally, given the strike action we've already been talking about, there's been a bit of a backlash as to say this is a bit bread and circuses. This is a bit you want to celebrate us as the heroes of the COVID pandemic, whilst at the same time the government is not necessarily coughing up for the pay offer. So it's one of those things which, whilst I'm sure many of the people involved are very happy with it, it's still the sort of thing where
this is
become political.
People aren't going to like this, forgive me, but is this a bit gesture politics from the palace in a sense? Because people have a right to strike, and a lot of people may support these strikes, but it is also inevitably, it is costing some lives or having damaging effect on people's ongoing lives and all the rest of it. And yet we're then celebrating them. I don't know, it doesn't sit quite right with me.
I think it is gesture politics. I wouldn't necessarily say that in terms of is the palace, putting their thumb on the scale in relation to the strike action. I think we can kind of bracket that off. But there is something about how Charles in particular, and you've seen it in the papers in recent weeks, wanting to make statements about slavery reparations, wanting to bring the NHS and to hug the NHS and so on in the course of his coronation. There is a kind of sense in which he's trying to connect...
Considering he's probably never used the NHS.
No, exactly. I mean, he's kind of... He likes alternative medicine, as we know. But it does seem like he's trying to connect with the public on the basis of what, your average Guardian editorial would suggest the public are concerned about. That does seem to be part of what he's doing and seems to be... Even though, I think it's largely uncontroversial to give soldiers or nurses a front row seat at the coronation. But in general, this approach does reek of gesture politics,
Yeah,
I think.
I don't know. I do think this is pretty standard. The royal family, at any occasion, whether that be the Jubilee or even the Queen's funeral, they invite the NHS. I mean, it's seen as the jewel in Britain's crown. I mean, alongside the royal family, it's the pride of Britain. I mean, yes, the strikes do let them down. But it's world-leading.
Yeah, well, is it, though? Well, it used to be. I wonder if, because everyone's talking...
It's a great British institution, isn't it?
Well, it is. Everyone's talking about reform, even the Labour Party. I mean, the Labour Party, actually, more than anybody else, is talking about reforming the NHS at the moment. And I wonder if this sort of holding everyone who works in the NHS up as an angel, if you like, actually reduces our chances of any sort of reform.
Oh, it does. I mean, for years, that conversation was just shut down completely. You couldn't criticise it in any way. And speaking of reform, you want to privatise everything. I think now there is a more nuanced discussion going on. And I think even people within the NHS say that. I mean, there have been a number of articles just saying that working in the NHS with the staff shortages and the very poor workforce planning makes it very difficult. One thing I will say, though, with these strikes going on is it seems to always be between the unions and the government, but very few people address NHS management, the people who are doing the day-to-day planning for staff, for the workforce. And I do think that that needs to be brought into the conversation. I mean, no one ever mentions the CEO of the NHS, Amanda Pritchard. I don't think that would be the same if it was a private sector company.
No. Oh, interesting. Meanwhile, sticking with the monarchy, and I wonder if partly if this is why the monarchy does it. The Express is saying that they're being warned about becoming too distant to us, the people.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. So the think tank Civitas did a study of royal appearances over the years from, I think, about 2014. So in 2014, there were just over 3,000 royal engagements to last year, just over 2,000. So that's quite a drop.
Yeah.
And they're saying that this might not be a good thing for the monarchy. If the monarchy becomes less visible, they can become less relevant, and maybe they need to step it up a little bit. That's also a criticism, of course, of Charles's idea of a slimmed-down monarchy. I don't know if I agree. I kind of think that when they're not in our face so much, we tolerate them more. I think the more we see of them, actually, the more people get irritated. You know, like the whole Harry and Meghan drama. But that's something I only know anecdotally. They were saying in the article maybe they could bring in the princesses, you know, Beatrice and Eugenie. But I don't know. I've always heard a lot of criticism of having lots of working royals. You know, people would prefer that they do something outside of that. So I'm not sure I agree with this article.
OK, let us know what you think about that one. GBviews at gbnews.uk. More royals on the front line of royal duty, or get on with the job and actually do something proactive. And I don't know. I don't know.
Well, one of the suggestions in the article is that you focus on the younger royals, so who are very, very popular, such as the Prince and Princess of Wales. What do you make of that, Tom?
Well, I think there's a tendency to look at this question the wrong way around because, I mean, first of all, the monarchy is naturally going to be distant from the public. You know, this is one of the, in my view, kind of the regrettable things about the whole institution. But nevertheless, there's this idea, again, as if they've got some young kind of PR whiz, and you want to upfront the young ones. They're relatable, they're interesting, they're fresh faces, or whatever. And the thing about even William and Kate is that they still have some kind of, you might say, kind of Harry and Meghan tendencies. They want to kind of open up about their feelings. They want to talk about their mental health. There's a tendency to want to kind of approach the
you can't really compare the two.
I think
they've done a few.
They started in quite a similar space. I mean, it was that was when Prince Harry first started opening up. It was when him and William put together this Heads Together campaign, and they both openly talked about their struggles and so on.
But that's very much
I think now we just need to bang their heads together.
I guess what I'm saying is they tend to have this approach of, I think the thing that really works with the public, I think the thing that stood the monarchy in good stead is this sense of we're public servants, we're here for you and so on. Whereas I think this kind of public emoting, which Harry and Meghan are a much more extreme form of, but I think even many of the other younger royals like to get involved in, the more people have of that, the kind of soul-bearing stuff is where people start to have enough of it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, really.
It's not very British, is it,
No.
really?
It's not very British.
Bad thing to say?
But also, it's like, I think there's an element of stop whining up. The rest of us just have to get on with it.
Yeah.
And you're all whining on, or whatever.
Oh, yes. When people hear about Harry obsessing over where he was going to sit at the coronation, they just roll their eyes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh,
but it does seem like a touch, doesn't it?
Yes.
All and the rest of us. Forgive us if we're doing all coughing away. The office has been fumigated this morning. And I think there's still remnants of it. So if we're still alive by 9:30, you're doing all right, really.
We'll be doing well. It is a bit musky in here, isn't it? Can you feel it?
I can feel it. Well, I'll just say, if there are any fruit flies or mice in my throat, they're well and truly dead by now. There you go.
Hopefully we're not by the end of the show.
No, hopefully not. Tom, Candice, thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Thank you.
OK, let's bring you up to date with other stories that are going on today. And the Shadow Armed Forces Minister has told GB News a blind eye is being turned to predators around Parliament. Luke Pollard has described Westminster as the most unprofessional workplace he's encountered. Speaking to Gloria De Piero, the MP who recently announced he'll step back from politics, says victims of abuse and bullying are repeatedly being let down.
The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says more nurses' strikes would have a hugely concerning impact. The government's under pressure to prevent the most extreme strike yet. It could involve emergency departments, intensive care and cancer wards. 74% of Unison members, though, who are nurses, voted to accept the same offer. The RCN rejected.
Royal Mail has reached a pay deal with the Communication Workers Union. In a statement, the CWU said their executive will consider the agreement before it's voted on by members. More than 110,000 postal staff at Royal Mail held several nationwide strikes last year. Details on the agreement are expected next week. And just to say on that, sorry, I'm just getting my 2 pennies worth.
Get in.
It'll be very interesting to see what the CWU members make of that, because now the nurses have rejected a deal that their union suggested they take. Will the posties do the same and think, look, the nurses think they can do better? Do you think they'll feel like they can do better?
Interesting, because I've spoken to the boss and deputy of the CWU over the last year. Well, you know, they're coming on the show.
Oh, yeah, well, I have as well, actually.
Well, there you go, then.
I was there too.
And actually, a lot of union bosses make arguments, and you sometimes think, oh, come on, are you being totally realistic? They played a different game, actually, somehow. And I think they're in a different position because we all deal with our posties, and a lot of us know our posties.
We love them, don't we? We do love our posties.
I don't know, I've always had more sympathy with the posties. Somehow. Yeah.
I think you're right,
actually,
though. It's that face-to-face
It was
thing.
them that I tooted. I told you yesterday I tooted a picket line, and it was posties.
It was posties. Do you know what? I think you're right about that. I think, again, it's the Britishness of a postie. Everyone knows they're postie, and you want to look after them, give them a cup of tea, that kind of thing. So the fact they wanted more pay, a lot of people actually supported that. They work hard. They're out there in all weather.
Mind you, I could fall out with mine.
Oh, could you?
Could.
We started something now.
Well, because he came round one of our days off, and he said, I went out he buzzed the door to get in because he had a parcel, and he said, oh, you're not going on telly looking like that, are you? and I looked all right. I was dressed. I had a bit of stubble, but...
Oh, people are so rude. No, I wouldn't have handled that.
It's all right. He did it with a glint in his eye. So
oh, well, that's all right then. Well, I had a similar situation. I'll tell you this quick story. Went into the dry cleaners the other day, and he didn't recognise me. And he went, did you drop the items off? I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, you look very different when you drop them off to when you pick them up. So I came in my full telly hair and makeup, and I dropped them off in just no makeup and my joggers. So he didn't recognise me.
Well,
I thought, that's a different person.
You walked in. Well, yesterday morning when I saw you with no makeup on, I didn't recognise you.
Oh, don't be mean.
Well, it's not mean.
He was like, oh dear, it does take a lot of time.
You just know you look just different skin
pale,
different skin tone.
I'm this colour naturally.
Yes, she really is. Yeah. Anyway,
look, we digress.
I was going to say more serious matters, but actually it's a celebration of life as well, because it's almost a year since the incredible Bowel Babe died after fearlessly battling cancer and, of course, helping others in their own fight.
Well, now a documentary is being released about Deborah James's incredible work, and Stephanie Tecci joins us more to tell us more about this.
Good morning, Stephen Eddy. You look like a ray of sunshine. You naturally are a ray of sunshine too. Don't want to leave you out.
No, we're talking about a ray of sunshine. And that's one thing Deborah James really was.
She did. I think, as a nation, we were all gripped by her story, and she managed to inspire us and find, positivity in moments of darkness, which she showed through her brave battle with bowel cancer for 5 years. So tomorrow's documentary on BBC Two will be for the first time we get to see her in her own words narrating what her final few months were like. And she always just had this sense of positivity towards her situation and about dying, which we don't really like talking about as a society. But more than anything, she did encourage us to check our poo for any symptoms. So in this documentary, we're going to be seeing unseen footage, which was, filmed by her friends and family. She'll be narrating the documentary as well. And she had so many key moments, including receiving a damehood from Prince William shortly before she died. So I think there was so many milestones which she managed to fit in her, short life. So it will be quite a very inspiring documentary to watch.
I mean, it's quite something because it's one thing, we think of it from a distance, don't we, if we're not affected by this.
Yeah.
You can say, oh, yes, she was very brave and she remained very positive, and isn't that all a good thing?
Yeah.
The reality is, if you're living with something that you know could take your life for 5 years, I mean, that's a huge strain on her family, on her husband.
Totally. And you know why I was always surprised by her? Because every time I saw her, she always looked so glamorous, and she almost like gave, you know, a big, you know, 2 fingers up to a cancer in that sense, and she'd done it with dignity, and she's had so many lasting legacies, including the Bowel Babe Fund, which has raised, I think at the moment, £11.3 million, which is doing vital research into early detection for cancer. So there has been that lasting legacy.
Oh, absolutely. And Stephanie, I mean, the viewership of this documentary is going to be huge, isn't it? Because even watching that footage that's just been going across the screens there for us, it's emotional to see her, because you feel like you know her, because she was everywhere in the past few months of her life. And as you say, looking incredible and smile on her face, people feel like they know her personally.
Definitely, and I think we're going to get to know her more through this documentary, and sometimes in life it only takes that one person to shine a light on such a topic such this, which will have a lasting imprint for everybody.
Yeah.
Will we see some of her family?
Yeah, we will. We will. We'll be seeing a lot of unseen footage and hearing from her husband and her children, so I recommend for everyone to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, it really is. Can we just have a brief word about Paul O'Grady?
Yeah, so details of his funeral have been released, and it's not going to be a sad affair. It's going to be quite vibrant, because reports have come out and said that it's going to be in the Port Lymph Wildlife Park, as we know that he loved animals, so it's going to be quite fitting for him to have a send-off there, because sources are saying that, you know, he would want to be surrounded by all the animals that he knowed and loved, which I think is quite fitting.
Yeah, it's... I mean, it is going to be a real celebration. And actually, that's what you would want.
Yeah.
People to just celebrate, have a good time at your funeral.
Definitely, and with animals as well. I think they'll definitely lift the spirits up of everybody. So
I think fitting.
Yeah, a good closure for a man who'd done so much amazing work. As we know, he was the ambassador for the Battersea Dogs and Cats Home.
And it will be star-studded, I'm sure.
Definitely. Definitely. It's going to be a grand affair.
It will be a grand affair. Have a laugh, have a giggle.
Yeah.
That's what I would want at mine, you know. People just have a laugh, celebrate, not be miserable.
Oh, gosh.
Life well lived and all that sort of thing.
I don't even want to think about that, Stephen.
It's going to be centuries of work before I go.
Good. You're going to live to 105.
Oh, you never know.
I called it first.
All right, there you go. Steph, thanks very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. Now, up next, smart motorways written off. The government ditches plans for any more. This is GB News.
Hello there, I'm Craig Snell. Here is your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, as we go through the next few days, a good deal of cloud around actually for most of us today, but the brighter skies are set to return as we go into next week. So here's the situation at the moment. We've got high pressure trying to move in across the country, but these two weather fronts are a focus of some cloud and some outbreaks of rain, especially across western parts today. You can see this on the graphics, quite a grey start across many western areas, some outbreaks of rain, especially across Scotland, Wales, southwest England. Towards the east, we have some brightness, also some mist and fog around first thing. And as we go through the course of the day, generally a lot of England and Wales remaining fairly cloudy with some damp conditions. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it should brighten up as the day goes on. Some sunshine developing, but that may just trigger a few showers too. But it's in the sunshine, feeling quite warm here, highs of 17 degrees, but still feeling a little bit disappointing really, where that cloud lingers throughout the day across England and Wales. Into the evening, a lot of us turned dry as any rain generally fizzles out as we approach midnight. Some clear spells developing too, especially across eastern parts of England, northern parts of Scotland. So here we could just see a touch of frost as we start Monday morning. But for most of us under the cloud cover, no real problems with temperatures overnight. So going into Monday, a bright start for East Anglia, southeastern England, but actually here some cloud may return as the day goes on. So the best of the sunshine, I think, on Monday across parts of the Midlands, central, southern England, northern Scotland also doing quite well, and then eventually also Northern Ireland too. And it's here where we'll see the highest of the temperatures on Monday. Could potentially see 18, 19, possibly 20 degrees in some sheltered spots of Scotland in the sunshine. And generally, if you do see the sunshine, feeling fairly pleasant. And a very similar day is in store sure as we go into Tuesday. Again, warmest of the weather up across northwestern Scotland. And then come Wednesday, generally cloudier for most of us. But again, temperatures not doing too badly for the time of year.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. Today, smart motorways are scrapped. The government pulls the plug on building any more, but the AA says we need to ditch the ones we already have. We will keep backing you. The Foreign Secretary meets with the G7 with the promise to keep supporting Ukraine.
How stuffed is your freezer? We're ditching fresh food and spending our cash in the frozen aisle instead. And more royal revelations as the King invites thousands of army and health staff into Buckingham Palace for a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
It's Sunday, the 16th of April. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Now, we're starting with news that is getting you talking this morning because it's something that affects, well, nearly all of us. Most of us have to drive on the motorways at some point or other, and you will have come across either smart motorways or those signs that say, we're building a smart motorway. Well, there's interminable roadworks that are everywhere. Anyway, could all change because plans for new smart motorways are on the scrap heap after a major government climb down.
Yes, the controversial setup has been blamed for numerous deaths as hard shoulders are turned into extra lanes at busy times. But the ones we already have won't be going anywhere for now. But the AA is demanding that they're scrapped immediately.
Well, let's talk to motoring journalist Amanda Stretton, who joins us now. Amanda, really good to see you this morning. Look, these have been, I know they've been around actually since about 1995 initially, haven't they? But they've always been controversial.
They have. It was interesting. I mean, they were originally brought in to obviously ease congestion on the roads. We know we've got a problem with too many cars on the roads and not enough space. So originally they were brought to easing congestion, but at the time of their introduction, there was very little education about what this actually meant. And there was a lot of confusion with people about whether they were allowed to use the smart motorway or not, because of course, prior to that, spending any time in the hard shoulder, unless you were broken down, was not permitted. But over time, smart motorways have evolved and changed, and the technology that has gone into monitoring them has been improved. But as we know from nearly 39 deaths, it seriously has not been improved enough.
I mean, they are dangerous. There's no denying that. So that there has been an issue of confusion, as you say. People don't know if they're able to use them. There's also been an issue of trust, hasn't there? Drivers not trusting in the smart motorway and the messaging that they're giving.
That's right. That's because the technology that was used to monitor them in the beginning relied on a human being actually looking at cameras. That was then updated so that it was then done automatically by computer systems. So as a road user, you're unaware if somebody is actually monitoring that feed, or if it is being done by a computer system, or if it's even working at all. And that, I think, is where the lack of trust has come into, and people have become increasingly concerned. We hear repeatedly over the last number of years where the rollout of smart motorways has increased about cars that have stopped on a live lane. They haven't been able to make it to a refuge area, and yet the signs hadn't been updated. And that's why there's been a fundamental lack of trust. Yeah,
and I'll tell you what, Amanda, I mean, you're always out and about on the road. Obviously, there's a stretch of the M1 I drive up and down every day, just before Junction 11, heading north. And there's a smart motorway stretch, and whether it is hard shoulder or an active lane, every single day I see somebody drive down it. Every day. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out. Someone's going to die on that at some point.
Exactly, and this is the problem. I mean, I do think my one concern about the sweeping ban on smart motorways is that it hasn't actually addressed the fundamental problem, or problems, I should say. The first being why they were introduced in the first place. This is to ease congestion because we have this fundamental problem. But the second is how we're actually going to solve and reinstate trust in the smart motorways that we have currently got running, and the final two that are going to continue because they are more than 3/4 complete at the moment. The government have said they're going to increase the number of refuge areas, which is also great. But of course, you've got to think that probably 80% or 70% of road users who have licenses and cars on the road today actually passed their driving test before smart motorways were ever a thing. So unless they have actually been educating themselves on the rules and legislation around smart motorways, then there's no guarantee they actually know what they're supposed to be doing.
Why don't they just switch them off?
Well, that would be that's certainly one way of going about it, and they certainly could. I mean, that's what campaigners are campaigning for, is that all hard shoulders are reinstated onto motorways, and I can certainly see the point in that. Of course, that brings you back to the fundamental problem of they were introduced in the first place to ease congestion. We do have this problem, and we're sort of going around in circles, dancing around the issue, and we haven't actually addressed that.
The scrapping of smart motorways, new ones at least, are on the front of many of the papers today. Rishi Sunak did make it one of his promises in his leadership campaign. But do you think this is actually about concerns of motorists, or is this just a big money-saving operation for the government?
Well, I suspect it's probably very much the latter. I mean, it was definitely, as you say, it was a campaign pledge in Rishi Sunak, and it was definitely feeding into public opinion at the time. I think everybody is of the opinion that they're not totally comfortable with smart motorways. Whether or not they were passionate about it or not is one way or the other. But the fact that it's going to save about £1 billion is undoubtedly playing very large in the government's mind, given the cost of living and all the other pressures on the public purse that there are at the moment. So I think I would very much like to see that money if it can be redirected into other road schemes to keep the roads running better and congestion eased, I'd very much like to see the money refiltered and reallocated, but I suspect, unfortunately, it probably won't.
All right, Amanda, as someone who was a professional driver, I mean, basically on the racetrack rather than going up and down the motorways at high speed, but nevertheless, what is your advice to people if they approach a smart motorway, if they break down, you know, anywhere really? What should people do to stay safe as best they can?
Well, the best thing they can do is, if they are able to, by whatever the means, even if they think they have a flat tire or whatever, get themselves into a refuge area. You are better destroying the wheel hub and running your car on a blown out tire than you are stopping on a live lane. If you do stop in a live lane, obviously get your hazard lights on as soon as possible and stay in the car with your seatbelts on. You are still going to be safer staying in the car than trying to get out and waiting for help to arrive. But if you can get to a refuge area, get out of the car on the passenger side, so you're not getting out of the car into what would be the live traffic, on the passenger side, and make your way over the barriers into a safe waiting place. That is the best way to try and stay safe.
Amanda, as always, it's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Lots of you getting in touch on this story. Andrew from Ealing says, as a recovery truck driver, I'm often called to drivers who have broken down on these roads, and believe me, they are scary. And as an owner of a classic car, I avoid them like the plague. I am so pleased that the government has had a change in view on these death traps.
Talfin says, we were very fortunate on the M4 coming home. A car in front of us broke down on the inside lane of the smart part of the M4. We were stuck trying to overtake it, and all these huge lorries bearing down behind, and it seemed like forever till we were able to get past. Terrifying. We were both very shaken, and never again would I drive on the inside lane of these extremely dangerous motorways. The government should get rid of the current ones.
I did actually have a really similar situation the other day on a smart motorway where exactly the same thing happened. Somebody had broken down on the inside lane and just everybody slamming on their brakes to try and get around that car. Obviously, the messaging on the gantries hadn't yet updated. It can be so, so dangerous. Thankfully, in that case, it seemed to be OK, but it is a great concern. And Kevin's been in touch and says, good morning, Stephen and Ellie. And in response to our polls that are taking place on Twitter today, do keep your votes coming in. He says, do not ban horse racing, but do ban smart motorways.
It's just like you do wonder who... Well, I know that the ideas were... In 1995, they were first introduced. It was vastly expanded during the early 2000s. But they've obviously, they've kept at it. But at what point did anyone say, let's talk to some drivers? See what drivers make of it all. And you can guarantee they would have got 70, 80% of drivers saying, oh, no, actually.
Yeah,
forget it.
Yeah, would you use it? Would you trust it? I'm not sure many people would say yes to both of those things. Do let us know what you think about that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Keep them coming in. And also let us know, do you agree with the AA that the current smart motorways that have been completed and are still being used, should they be reversed? Yeah. Should we go that one step further and just ban them entirely?
It should be easy. You just
switch them off.
Literally switch it off. And so the hard shoulder is always a hard shoulder. I mean, it's not difficult.
No.
Is it?
Well, you wouldn't think so, would you?
You wouldn't think so. But let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Now, after more than a year of conflict in Ukraine, just how long will the international community keep supporting Kyiv? Well, the Foreign Secretary is proving our mettle today as he makes more commitments at the G7 meeting in Japan.
Well, it comes as there's huge concern over what China is planning for Taiwan. So joining us now is the Professor of US Politics at University College Dublin, Scott Lucas. Good morning, Scott. Really good to have you on the programme with us. So the messaging from James Cleverly is going to be quite clear today, isn't it? He's going to say we need to keep backing Ukraine for as long as it takes. Will the other G7 countries agree?
Yes. I think, we have flutters from time to time about whether certain countries like France may sort of edge towards saying, look, we really need to have negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, which would risk allowing Russia to continue to occupy part of Ukrainian territory. But I think by and large, you've seen a firm resolve. Consider, for example, that the United States has just issued another package of military aid to Ukraine, has now provided more than $30 billion in military aid. The UK, by the way, has committed more than 2.3 billion pounds. Japan has just announced a new package of humanitarian assistance and has announced more sanctions on Russia. Canada has also announced more sanctions on Russia. Italy and Germany, and especially Germany, have really toughened their lines in support of Ukraine in recent months, including the delivery of battle tanks, which will take place throughout this year towards Ukraine and could shift the situation for Ukraine to regain more territory in forthcoming months.
I mean, the issue is, though, it's not just about goodwill, is it? And it's not just about determination. It's about money, and that is a finite resource.
Well, I'm just going to put a point to you, and it's a personal one, and that is, in World War II, I don't think anybody said, look, we need to stop the war because it's costing us money. You have got the most serious conflict on European soil since 1945. And I know that people in many countries have sacrificed before it. We've seen Russia's risk to food supplies. We've seen Russia's risk to energy supplies. We have seen the fact that we have our own economic challenges, which preceded the Ukrainian war. But at the end of the day, I think most people realize here in the UK and elsewhere, the people who face the biggest challenges, the people who face the biggest threat are those Ukrainians who have successfully resisted that Russian invasion, but at a great cost of lives now for 14 months.
I mean, the Ukrainian people will certainly be very grateful for this ongoing support and this pledge to continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. But, Scott, this is a marked shift, isn't it, from the messaging coming from the G7 last year, where there was more pressure for Ukraine to agree to end the war, to enter into negotiations with Russia. What's changed in that time?
Vladimir Putin hasn't changed, but it's the recognition of what Vladimir Putin's doing. In the first 2 months of the war, we even had face-to-face talks between Ukrainian and Russian delegations in the country of Belarus. Ukraine tabled a 15-page proposal at that point, and they agreed, for example, look, we'll talk about the future of Crimea. This area occupied by Russia since 2014, but we need to freeze the attacks. We need a ceasefire. Moscow ripped that up. They had no intention of negotiating on those lines. And instead, what they did is they stepped up their attacks. You might remember last summer, they obliterated cities like Mariupol, killing tens of thousands of civilians in that city alone. And it was pretty evident to everyone, no, Vladimir Putin wasn't intent on negotiating. He was intent on conquering this country. And indeed, his ex-president, Dmitry Medvedev, said last week that Ukraine should cease to exist. So that line hasn't changed. And I think it was that recognition. There were some European countries that really said, look, can we avoid the bloodshed? Can we find an off-ramp for Vladimir Putin? You've just been talking about motorways. Vladimir Putin doesn't want an off-ramp. He wants to charge further ahead, even as he's now beginning to lose on the battlefield.
And the role of China as well in all of this has probably brought about that change as well.
Well, I think it's actually interesting what China's doing, because I know that there are other tensions between the U.S. and Europe and China. You've been talking about Taiwan. But the fact is that China's been playing a balancing game. Consider this. Xi Jinping went to Moscow at the start of March. And Moscow was like, yeah, we're going to get military assistance from the Chinese. And indeed, there was a U.S. intelligence report that the Chinese were considering this. The Chinese backed off. The Chinese are saying very loudly, we're not providing military assistance to Russia. They are emphasizing what they call their 12-point plan for political talks. And they have even said, we don't support this invasion. We don't support the reaction against the invasion because we don't want to ally with the U.S. and with NATO, but we're not going to go all in with Vladimir Putin. And here's why. Why do you go in with a Russia which could lose this conflict, even if you give it military support? China wants to get economic and political advantage by looking like the good guy, by building relations with Africa, by building relations with Asia, and importantly, they want an investment deal with Europe, which has been stalled. So China's going to balance. They're going to stay right in the middle. You're not facing a Chinese-Russia axis, at least when it comes to Ukraine.
OK, so if that's the case, and that's obviously, from the international perspective, extremely positive,
Sure.
Why then is China doing all this saber rattling around Taiwan?
Because China considers Taiwan to be its territory. You know, we're in the same situation we've been since 1949, when you had the Communist Party took control in Beijing, but you had the nationalists that went to this island of Taiwan to establish the government there. And periodically, we have flare-ups over Taiwan. We even came close to nuclear war over Taiwan in the 1950s. Fortunately, we're not at that point now. But what you're seeing here is China will continue to flex its muscle with those military drills. They'll continue to say, don't you dare support Taiwanese independence. The red lines are still there. On the one hand, Taiwan will not become independent. On the other hand, we're not looking at a Chinese military invasion right now. And again, here's why. The day that China tries to overrun Taiwan, it rips up a lot of its economic position with other countries in the world. And economics trumps military position right now.
Yeah, and perhaps just as well. Scott Lucas, really good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Wait, isn't that interesting? See, it is all the saber rattling. And interestingly, the United States not trusting China as a peacemaker when it comes to Ukraine. But at the minute, isn't it the best hope there is at the minute? They are actually, I mean, they might be more friendly with Russia, but they are technically neutral in this at the moment.
I mean, Scott Lucas was making a very good point there. I mean, Russia went to China hoping for military aid and hoping for support in that sense. They didn't get it, did they?
No.
They were told no, so there was a red line from China towards Russia. Perhaps that is something that does need to be acknowledged by the West. But yes, great concern about Taiwan and the drills that are taking place over Taiwan. As Scott was saying there have been flare-ups since the 40s.
Yeah.
But it's
very
saber rattling is unsettling, isn't it?
Very confusing, because if you're of a certain age, you just think of Taiwan as just this separate country that is off the coast of China. It's not. It's technically China. It all gets very confusing when you look at it in detail.
It does, yeah. Let us know what you make of any of that conversation that we just had with Scott Lucas. gbnews@gbnews.uk.
Okay, let's have a look at the stories today, and James cleverly will use the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting, as we've been saying, to promote free and open Indo-Pacific, and look at the situation in Ukraine and Taiwan.
Royal Mail has reached a pay deal with the Communication Workers Union. In a statement, the CWU said their executive will consider the agreement before it's voted on by members. More than 110,000 postal staff at Royal Mail held several nationwide strikes last year. Details on the agreement are expected next week.
Now, your vegan wedding's causing a bit of a stir.
I knew it would.
Are they on honeymoon yet?
No, they're going to Bali in summer. They're both teachers, so they can't go on honeymoon yet. They're going to go in summer.
They're not going to be watching, are they?
No, I don't think they will be watching, no.
Right time of day, because
They'll be asleep, I think.
Susan says, because obviously the food was dreadful, it sounds it. On the discussion of the vegan wedding that you attended, Ellie, I would be interested to know what the dress code was. Could you wear normal clothes, or did you have to wear non-animal attire? No leather shoes, boots, belts, wool. Why you can't wear? Can you wear wool?
Cheap. Yeah, you couldn't, could you?
No.
Product.
So what did you have to do?
So, Susan, very good question. I was concerned about this. I did think I'd have to be wearing sustainable clothing and things like that, but I was wearing leather shoes. The groom, though, I will say, was wearing vegan Doc Marten shoes, so not leather. So yes, he's very cool. Very, very cool.
Right on.
Yeah. So he was wearing vegan DMs, you'd call them, but he didn't extend that to the guest list, you'll be glad to know. So the food, we did all have to be vegan, but we were allowed to wear what we like. But it was an experience going to a totally vegan wedding.
Yeah.
Never been to one like that before. And Bernard's been in touch this morning, and it's a question to me, and he says, if the NHS is so world-leading as you describe it, Ellie, why does no other country in the world use the NHS model in their own healthcare systems? Well, I think the point I was trying to make, Bernard, was it was once the envy of the world. It was world-leading at one time. It is now on its knees. We can all appreciate that. I think wherever you are on political lines, you will appreciate the fact that the NHS is in a mess. It's on its knees. Some would say it's on its face. But you think over the pond in the US, we are still the envy of many people in the US who can't call for an ambulance because they can't afford one, or they can't get prescription medicine because it's $400, $500 for, you know, some medications.
Yes, I'm not sure that the insurance, the Medicare system, all that sort of thing,
Yeah.
it's a mess in the States.
It's an absolute mess.
You're all right if you've got a bit of money. If you haven't, you're screwed, really.
I'm not saying that makes us perfect,
No.
but I'm saying we could have the foundations of something. We have certainly had it in the past. It's how we get back to that now. Is it root and branch reform? Is it privatising it? I don't know. But it certainly was.
There's got to be some sort of hybrid model, as they say in today's political circles, hasn't there? Where some of it's just provided free, some of it you have to get some insurance for, and all that sort. I mean, I don't know, but then you'd have to pay less national, because obviously a lot of your national insurance goes to the NHS, so you'd have to pay less on that. So you're not sort of paying out any more money. I don't know. Something's got to be done.
Something's got to be done. I think everybody can agree on that. I mean, the waiting list alone is I mean, how many now?
7 million.
7 million. I was talking to a lady the other day who has a back injury so severe she can't walk. She has children, 2 very young children, and she said she cannot afford to go private, but she's going to have to get the money from somewhere, loans, because she cannot wait the year that it would be on the NHS wait list. I mean, you think of people like that, can't walk.
No.
And it's not an option for her to not be able to walk when you've got 2 small children.
No.
So difficult.
Why isn't that just not an immediate case? I mean, it's quality of life, isn't it? But the whole system's stretched, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll have a view on that. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Plus, tell us what you're cooking at the moment, what you're buying in the supermarket, because up next, frozen food versus fresh. Now, is there really any difference, and what are our preferences? We are seeing a change in how we shop. We'll tell you more. This is Breakfast on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 7:27. You are watching and listening to Breakfast.
Now, with the cost of living crisis, as we all know about, inflation, well, we know all about that, soaring food prices, heck, we know about that too. Many households are being forced to tighten the purse strings. That's putting it very politely, really.
It really is. And one way that shoppers are adapting is by swapping out fresh produce for frozen. That's according to new retail data.
Let's talk to consumer journalist Harry Wallop. Morning to you, Harry. Nice to see you. Look, what sort of difference is price-wise then between fresh and frozen?
Well, it does certainly depend on what the product is, but as a general rule, frozen food can be substantially cheaper, especially with things like vegetables, fruit. It is significantly cheaper frozen. With meat, it's a bit less clear cut, but fish is also another product that's a lot cheaper frozen than fresh. The real issue is not so much the prices per se, but it's wastage. It's food wastage, and a lot of consumers realise they're going to waste a lot less food when it's in the freezer than when it's in the fridge.
Yeah, OK, and we can understand that. You sort of use what you will and put the rest back. Why is it cheaper? Because does that mean, and it was always the sort of preconception, wasn't it, that if you're buying frozen food, it's not as good quality or it's not as healthy for you? Because obviously there are costs involved in freezing this stuff and the packaging and all the rest of it. So why is it then cheaper?
Well, there are also costs involved in fresh food. And of course, once it's frozen, if you take, say, fish, the fish is frozen on the boat. And then it's a stable product. If it's fresh, you're having to truck it in refrigerated, lorries all around the country. I mean, yeah, same obviously true with frozen, but it's the cost of electricity with the refrigerated trucks makes very little difference, frankly, with fresh or whether it's frozen. When it's frozen, it's stable and it kind of stays that way. With fresh, it's a battle to get it into the supermarkets as quickly as possible. Has a short shelf life. It's far more wastage. So that's one of the reasons why fresh is more expensive.
What are we finding that people are switching to in terms of frozen foods now? The cost of living is biting. Is it meat that people are going for? Is it fruit? Both of those things are very expensive if they're bought fresh.
Yeah, so obviously most people, one of the reasons why it was considered not very fashionable back in the 1970s and considered poor nutritional quality, there just wasn't that many options. And of course, a lot of the frozen food was, dare I say, more at the junk food end of the category, pizzas and chips. I think the thing that's really taken off in the last couple of years is fresh fruit. And there's two things. A, you can get exotic fruit all year round in the freezer cabinet. And also smoothies have really taken off in big sales of smoothie makers and blenders and juicers. So things like frozen mango is so much cheaper. It's about a third of the cost frozen than fresh. And again, you can have just what, there's far less wastage. Mango is, dare I say, a very large fruit. If you're living on your own to consume all in one go, you can just get, bits of mango from the freezer, whack it in your smoothie or put it on top of your porridge. But that's the same with berries as well. Berries have proved to be very popular.
Yeah, I wonder why it's taken us this long then to sort of start to make the change. I mean, obviously the fresh fruit aisle is there as soon as you walk into the supermarket and it does draw your eye and your attention. Are enough of us aware of what is available frozen?
Well, I think you make a really good point, Stephen. I mean, the part of the problem is the frozen aisle is nearly always right at the back of the shop. It is still considered quite down market by some consumers. Iceland, it's taken them a decade really to turn their reputation around from sort of the days of Kerry Katona into now, a really viable alternative to the mainstream supermarkets. In France, there's a chain called Picard, which is incredibly upmarket. It's sort of the equivalent of Waitrose or M&S, and it is essentially a frozen food shop. We just don't have that in the UK. We're not accustomed, or many of us are not accustomed to just automatically thinking, well, things like pastries, just as good frozen, fruit is just as good frozen. So it's going to be slightly up to the supermarkets to make more of an effort, but that's a huge, huge change. Just switch the layout of a supermarket from the traditional kind of market. It looks like a lovely, country fair market with all the fruit and veggies. You walk in, and there's a reason why that's what you first see, because it just looks very nice. Stuff in plastic packaging in a freezer aisle just isn't as attractive.
Do you think this is a consumer habit that will be here to stay even when the economy eventually recovers?
Well, I think that is the case. During the last recession, all sorts of habits were formed, notably Aldi and Lidl really took off, and people didn't really go back to the supermarket that they'd left in order to go to Aldi and Lidl. With freezers, most people in Britain have just a fridge freezer, and there's not that much space. That's part of the problem. You need a chest freezer to take full advantage of the cheap prices of frozen food. So the question is whether people made an investment in a big chest freezer, or small chest freezer even. And we do know that sales of freezers did actually do really well a couple of years ago as we were coming out of lockdown. So, I think some people will keep with that habit.
Yeah. OK, Harry, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. I think it's really interesting. I've started buying more frozen stuff.
Me too.
I bought some frozen berries and things. But do you know what?
What do you have that in?
Smoothies.
Do you?
Smoothies.
Well, you're very good.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like they're great for smoothies because you can bang them in frozen and up it goes. But with those soft fruits, what you can't do is then defrost them and have them because they go to mush when they defrost.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
So it depends what you're doing with them. That's the issue. But things like I did see, and I nearly bought the other day, like frozen sliced onion.
I've seen that as well, and garlic.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is tempting, isn't it? I mean, it'd be very convenient.
But whether that is cheaper than just buying a pack of onions, I don't know.
I doubt it.
I need to investigate.
Do some investigation. Have a look. If anybody knows, do let us know. gbnews@gbnews.uk. I'm certainly buying more things in my freezer now. I think I've made the transition, but I'm very bad. I would buy chicken fresh and then freeze it. But fish, I buy totally frozen all the time. Don't buy fresh fish. No, I buy frozen fish now. And all my veggies, I do buy frozen.
You see, I tend to buy fresh veggies apart from peas.
Oh, I love a pea.
You see, I like fresh cauliflower and fresh broccoli and things, but actually you can buy the florets and that all in a bag and probably is cheaper.
Put it in the freezer, yeah. I find it easier, especially it's convenient as well. I mean, if you're not at home too much, that's what my choice was as well. It's a lot of food wastage. I felt so bad throwing away so much food. So for me, the freezer was a lot more convenient. At least I knew it wasn't going to waste. But there is a cost benefit as well, which is, of course, what many people are finding now. Let us know, have you changed the way that you shop, what you're buying? Are you making the switch to frozen, whether that's convenience or whether that's a cost incentive? Let us know. gbnews.uk.
Yeah, loads of you getting in touch on the Ukraine situation. See, and conspiracy theories are never a good thing because they're often just based in nonsense. Darren says, when are we going to have someone on that can tell the truth about the Ukraine conflict? Russia is winning hands down and everybody knows it. Well, you see, I don't know where you're getting that from, Darren, to be honest, because if they were winning hands down, they'd have taken over Kiev by now and they'd be in place, wouldn't they? And they're not. They're being held to the borders, if you like, the eastern borders. Pretty much. They've caused a lot of damage. There's a lot of conflict going on, but they haven't made that progression that they were expecting to make in a couple of days. And they haven't made it in more than a year. So I don't really know where you get that from, to be fair.
Steve's been in touch. He says we've got no choice but to continue the finance and assist Ukraine for as long as it takes. We are in for a rough ride.
Yeah, but Peter says if your academic guest wants to give his money to Ukraine, he can. I, however, don't want to. Well, I can understand why I can understand it, but what do we do? What are the consequences of not keeping going with this?
And what are the consequences of giving in to Putin? And if he can, if he can hold on to Ukrainian territory now, what would stop him from perhaps trying to seek more elsewhere? That's the concern, and that's certainly what the G7 think. That's why they want to continue to support and fund Ukraine for, now they say, as long as it takes.
Yeah, keep your thoughts coming through this morning. Up next, we've got all the news and views from Sunday's newspapers with our two special guests. This is Breakfast.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
.740, welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is the editor of Spite, Tom Slater, and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. Good morning to you both. Tom, let's start with you, shall we? And this is a big story on the front of many of the papers this morning. The police saving the Grand National. That's what the Mail's gone with.
Yes, well, they're also crediting themselves with saving the Grand National because of the fact it was their investigation which originally seemed to tip off Merseyside Police to the extent of what was going to take place. They had an undercover reporter go to a meeting in London, in fact, where Animal Rising were meeting to discuss their plans. Of course, the police should also take their role in this. 118 arrests were made. In the end, 9 protesters managed to actually get onto the track itself. 2 tried to glue themselves to some of the jumps as one of their favourite tactics. But in the end, it was only delayed by about 15 minutes, which is a strikingly quick response, considering the fact that, as we've all seen with other kind of offshoots of Extinction Rebellion and Insulate Britain, they can often bring places to a standstill for hours on end. It does sort of go to show when something happens on private property, people are a lot quicker to act, it seems like. So here we have the Mail, as I say, taking their share of the credit for alerting the police to this happening in the first place.
Mind you, I've got to say, I was a bit disappointed. As well as I'm not convinced that we should keep horse racing like that. It is a difficult one, but nevertheless, I did actually place a bet yesterday.
There you go. Did you feel encouraged by the attempts to...
Yeah, so I'm part of the problem, as my director is telling me. Thanks very much indeed. £5 each way on Mr. Incredible, which is what Aidan McGee suggested.
You shouldn't go with his tips. You should know that by now.
Don't listen to Aidan,
don't listen to Aidan. That's £10 down the pan.
Who did win? Because I think that's been overshadowed by all of this, isn't it?
I remember now.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Derek Fox, he won on Corach Rambler.
Corach Rambler.
Corach Rambler.
8-1 favourite.
Yeah, that'll be all right, wouldn't it?
The favourite wins. I don't like him when the favourite wins.
A bit boring,
No,
isn't
it's
it?
boring. But it has been overshadowed, hasn't it, by these protesters, hasn't it, Candice?
It has a little bit, though. Like we were saying, I think sometimes they just polarise opinion. They don't really tend to bring people with them when they use the tactics like that. Although there are some real questions to be asked about the cruelty towards the animals. You know, I mean, horses do die during the Grand National. They break their necks and they break their legs, and all kinds of things happen. Yeah. But I think when you use tactics like that, you can make people a bit more defiant, actually. People want to oppose you because they don't agree with your methods.
But I suppose they could say, is with a lot of these protesters, well, we've been arguing the point for decades and nothing happens. Therefore, we're forced into more direct action.
But they do seem to be sending people in the other direction as well. You know, even you yourself, Stephen. I think there's one thing about these activists is they kind of give off the impression that they're just against anything that everyone else is into. You know, it's like that old quote about Puritans. They didn't ban bear baiting to save the bear. They did it because people happen to enjoy it. There's a kind of similar thing going on here where they just seem to want to constantly mess with ordinary people's lives and pastimes, and that seems to get people's backs up, even those who might otherwise be open to that.
Well, we're running a poll on Twitter this morning, at GBNews on Twitter. Best part of 3,000 people voted so far. But it's not really shifted. 77% of people want to keep the horse race Grand National. 23% of you say ban it. So, I mean, it's a quarter, but nevertheless, it's overwhelmingly in favour of just leaving things alone.
But a lot of people saying in the comments, actually, if you delve into it, it's not as black and white as that. It's not a yes or no. Perhaps changes need to be made. Perhaps we don't use the whip like we have been doing. Perhaps
flat racing.
Perhaps we move to flat racing. So I think that would still be very fun. And do the fences need to be that high? I mean, that's where you see the falls. That's where you get the fatalities of the horses. Perhaps that needs to be changed. Maybe we need to modernise it. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. OK, Candice, you've got a story in The Telegraph about NHS slack.
Yes, so this is a story in The Telegraph, and it's about how private hospitals are picking up, basically, the slack left over from the backlog and obviously problems caused by the strikes. And what I found interesting in it, that Wes Streeting, the Labour MP, was quoted in it saying he would use even more spare capacity in the private sector. But he's also critical of the fact that the private sector is being used and that the NHS, more and more as it keeps going on, it needs reform. And I find it so fascinating that one of the most powerful voices for reform is actually coming from a Labour MP. You wouldn't expect that. And I just wonder if how much of it has to do with the fact he had cancer of the kidney and he had to go through treatment and he's sort of had this experience of going through the system, the hospital system, and maybe he feels more empowered and less ideological to talk about it.
Well, yeah, it's a fair point actually. When you've been through the system, it does give you a different insight, doesn't it? But of course, reform. We keep saying, I say it almost every day now. Reform is really something only the Labour Party can do. That's because if the Tories do it, they're just accused of privatising everything, and people don't trust them with it. I mean, that's what the polls say. People trust the NHS within Labour hands, even if they're going to change it fundamentally.
It's such a good point, and Tom and I were discussing that during the break, and that was the exact point he made. If it comes from the Labour Party, it becomes more credible in many voters' eyes. And so I think that's where he's performing quite a valuable role, although apparently one of the BMA leaders, Emma Runswick, has clashed with him a bit on this, because I think they have a more ideological perspective on the NHS, and they don't want to introduce any discussion about that whatsoever.
Yeah, it can't continue as it is. It just cannot. It's getting ridiculous.
But it is significant, isn't it? I mean, Shadow Health Tech, Wes Streeting, we had him on a few weeks ago, and he was fully acknowledging the fact that there would need to be reform.
There does. I mean, there was a really good report in the Telegraph this weekend about the doctors who've left to go work in Australia. And they were saying that one of the things that makes it easier for them is that the hospitals are fully staffed, because staffing has become an issue in this country. And one doctor was saying, I think it was his first year of training, one Saturday he was alone caring for 300 patients. And he said he nearly quit because his anxiety levels were so high.
Yeah, no, it's just not on. My anxiety levels have gone up slightly reading The Observer, Tom, this morning, because Joe Biden has pledged to run again. Nothing against him politically. I'm not putting it on a political line. I frankly think he's too old. But I think Donald Trump's too old as well.
No, exactly. It's become a very kind of geriatric race for the presidency in recent years over there. So he has indicated he's going to run again. He hasn't formally announced, but he suggested at the tail end of his trip to Ireland that was going to be in the coming days.
Was he telling people he was chatting to, apparently?
Apparently. Well,
one of his gaffes.
He's quite sort of loose-lipped.
Yeah.
This is one of the things. And so he managed to get through the trip to Ireland with relatively few gaffes. I mean, there was...
Relatively few.
I mean, for his standards, there was the pretty striking mixing up the All Blacks with the black and tans, which was pretty incredible. But, previously he's gone and almost kind of uttered far more geopolitically questionable things, like we went to Ukraine and seemed to indicate that there were American soldiers there and so on. He's done worse. So it's one of those things where, again, it's just all of those questions about whether or not he is up to the job at this point. I reckon he probably wouldn't be as bullish about announcing again, or certainly the people around him wouldn't be, if it wasn't for the fact that they're relatively confident that Trump might be the person opposite him rather than a Ron DeSantis or someone who they're a little bit more concerned about. But if nothing else, it locks in really another American presidential race where people are trying to choose between two very unpalatable options.
Yeah.
And that doesn't, I think, produce particularly good outcomes.
Is this really the best that the US has to offer? Two old men, really?
But this is what everyone is saying. And also the Republicans would be foolish to run Trump, because all the polling shows if someone like DeSantis was the nominee, he could actually beat Biden, whereas Trump cannot beat Biden. He's beaten him before and he'll probably beat him again. But with the Democratic Party, are there any other contenders coming up the ranks? I can't think of anyone. I mean, that's why they're running Joe Biden again.
Well, yeah, this is the problem.
That is the problem.
Actually, you never know. It's America, isn't it? It's a weird system.
Yeah.
It's just, you never know who's going to emerge from the system. I mean, which one of us had heard of Barack Obama before he was suddenly a candidate?
And that was fascinating, actually. His campaigning style was brilliant. I mean, he completely overtook someone like Hillary Clinton, this big legacy figure who everyone knew about, and he just emerged.
Yeah. I just think, and I say it's no disrespect, and if you're an older viewer or listener, it's no disrespect to those who are older, but sometimes things change. I mean, my parents aren't in their 80s, they're younger than that, and they say, why would you want these people to be running the country? You're not, you've got a lot of experience, but not necessarily as sharp and as on the ball as you need to be.
What is such a shame, I think, with Joe Biden is if even 20 years ago, 25 years ago, he could have had a shot at this. It could be a very, very different story. But as you say, Stephen, 80 years old, I mean, if he gets this second term, it takes him way into his 80s. Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable, really.
And it makes people start to think it's a kind of Potemkin presidency, like he's kind of there as the figurehead, but really the decisions are being made around him. And you see that whenever he makes one of these gaffes, he kind of announces something which you hear it from the president, you expect it to be US policy.
It gets rolled back.
No, he didn't mean that. Or as happened in Ireland, they just lightly edit the transcript, which is not great either.
Is that what they did?
They did with the black and tans thing. I think you could see it scored out, but they made it clear of what he was meaning to say.
But it's not a surprise, really, because he has been playing good politics with the Irish-American vote, hasn't he, for the past few days or so in Ireland. We were hearing yesterday, I think it's 10% of the US population claim Irish heritage. So
everyone in
much...
America thinks they're Irish.
Everyone thinks they're Irish. So very much appealing to quite a broad spectrum of voters back in the US.
You know, it's a big part, particularly of kind of Democratic voter base, in particular kind of cities and so on. But it was a strange visit insofar as it did, he spent, 15 hours in Northern Ireland, which was the kind of more politically significant bit.
What mattered.
Half of which, apparently, he was asleep, as we all now famously know, although he's probably asleep for large parts of the day these days. And then he goes down south and kind of goes on a kind of who do you think you are style family reunion tour. It was very personal, not particularly political, but as you say, at least it has some valence back home where people like this kind of thing.
Well, he certainly enjoyed himself on the second half of the trip, didn't he? That's for sure.
Can I throw this to both of you? I know, Tom, it's on your list, but Candice, what do you think of this? Because you be a prolific reader. I can see it. I can see it in your eyes. Jeeves and Wooster, P.G. Wodehouse, of course. I mean, they're just amazing, classic, hilarious bits of writing. It's all that they're being rewritten, according to the Sunday Telegraph.
I know this is a story in the Sunday Telegraph, and we were talking about it. There's just more and more and more stories like this now, of these classic stories being written for a supposedly modern audience, so that we can understand them. And I personally find that a bit infantilizing, that we feel that people nowadays can't read the stories as they were originally written, and that we have to be protected in some way from language that we might find offensive. And I just don't think that's true. I think that we can read these things in the context.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I went to it, Tom.
I haven't got much to add to that other than to say it is incredibly patronising. It's also what we're going to do, just kind of constantly having to, novels constantly have to speak to the present. Sometimes you do want to reach the past. We call them the classics for a reason. How far back are you going to go? Are you going to go and get Homer's Odyssey and say there's too much violence in it or something?
Well, plus, of course...
The Old Testament. You've got your hands on that, Jesus. The all trigger warnings, wouldn't it?
The skill of Wodehouse's writing is lost if you actually change his language, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, well, it was the same with Roald Dahl. His niche... being a bit obscene, going places that other people won't go, you destroy it. It's gone, and then children don't get the value of that anymore.
Yeah. I think the world's gone mad.
And, I mean, the question is, who asked for it? Who asked for
No
this
one, it
rewrite?
seems like,
Well,
the publishers. That's it.
Yeah. No, this is the trouble. Look, thank you both. We shall catch up with you a little bit later on.
Thank you very much.
Keep your views coming in this morning. Loads coming through. On frozen foods. Yep. Phil's not a fan. He says, I think there's a little water added to frozen foods. When the water boils off, the food is smaller. Don't know about that, but but it's something else I will investigate. We're going to bring you much more on that and all of the day's top stories coming up in just a few minutes. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Craig Snell. Here is your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, as we go through the next few days, for many of us it's going to be fairly cloudy tomorrow, but the brighter skies are set to return as we go into early next week. So here's the situation at the moment. We've got high pressure trying to move in across the UK, but these two weather fronts will move in across many western areas as we go through the next 24 hours, bringing in another spell of cloud and rain. You can see it on the graphics here, already moving into Northern Ireland and eventually into Scotland as the evening goes on. For many eastern parts, actually, it's going to remain fairly dry with some clear skies, maybe the odd mist and fog patch. But also here, we could just see a touch of frost. But further west, where we see the cloud and rain, it should be a fairly milder night compared to recent. So tomorrow, for a lot of us, it starts off fairly grey. Could just see some brightness across the east, but generally a lot of cloud around, some outbreaks of rain too. Quite light and patchy though, mainly nuisance value more than anything else. But then going into the afternoon, brighter skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland. This may well trigger a few showers, but also feeling quite warm here in the sunshine. Could see highs reaching 17 degrees, but still quite disappointing where that cloud lingers across parts of England and Wales. Into the evening, a lot of the showers generally fading away, so as we go into the small hours of Monday, actually quite a lot of the UK generally dry. Some clear skies, especially across Scotland and also across some eastern parts of England. So here, again, we could just see a touch of frost, but where the cloud hangs on, it should be fairly mild for most as we start Monday morning. So going into Monday, again, a fairly cloudy start across the west, but the clearer skies across the east will slowly spread their way a little bit further westwards as the day goes on. So some good sunshine developing across the Midlands, central southern England, northern Scotland, and maybe also Northern Ireland too. And in the sunshine, especially come Tuesday, we could see highs reaching 20 degrees in the north.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have. No one will be cancelled. Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Today, smart motorways are scrapped. The government pulls the plug on building any more, but the AA says we need to ditch the ones we already have. We will keep backing you. The Foreign Secretary meets the G7 with a promise to keep supporting Ukraine.
Back to Belfast, the Prime Minister returns to Northern Ireland this week as the Good Friday Agreement commemorations continue. And more royal revelations as the King invites thousands of army and health staff into Buckingham Palace for a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
It's Sunday, the 16th of April. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, loads of you getting in touch on a key story that is actually across a lot of the papers this morning as well. It's all about those smart motorways. So most of you will have experienced them at some point. You were saying earlier on, Ellie, you don't trust them.
I don't trust them. And it's these messages over the gantry that would say, move into the hard shoulder, perhaps, if there's a lot of traffic. I never do, because I worry, and perhaps it's outdated, but I do worry that somebody hasn't been across the cameras. They couldn't tell you if someone has broken down on that hard shoulder, and there could be an accident that you could be going straight into the back of. That's my fear, and that's why I don't trust them.
Well, it's not just you, is it? Because they reckon something like 40 deaths have been caused by smart motorways. So it's when people have either broken down and the lane hasn't been closed, or, as I see every day, actually, on the M1, people driving down the hard shoulder thinking it's an open lane when it isn't.
That's the other issue, isn't it?
That's one. So if you've broken down in that, you don't stand a chance because someone's hurtling towards you at 70 miles an hour. Anyway, campaigners are breathing a bit of sigh of relief because plans for new smart motorways are on the scrap heap. There's been a big government climb down.
Yes, the controversial setup has been blamed, as we say, for numerous deaths on hard shoulders as they are turned into extra lanes at busy times. But the ones we already have won't be going anywhere yet, but the AA is demanding that they're scrapped immediately.
Well, earlier we spoke to former racing driver Amanda Stratton.
Originally, they were brought to easing congestion, but at the time of their introduction, there was very little education about what this actually meant. And there was a lot of confusion with people about whether they were allowed to use the smart motorway or not, because, of course, prior to that, spending any time in the hard shoulder, unless you were broken down, was not permitted. But over time, smart motorways have evolved and changed, and the technology that has gone into monitoring them has been improved. But as we know from nearly 39 deaths, it seriously has not been improved enough.
I mean, they are dangerous. There's no denying that. So there has been an issue of confusion, as you say. People don't know if they're able to use them. There's also been an issue of trust, hasn't there? Drivers not trusting in the smart motorway and the messaging that they're giving.
That's right. That's because the technology that was used to monitor them in the beginning relied on a human being actually looking at cameras. That was then updated so that it was then done automatically by computer systems. So as a road user, you're unaware if somebody is actually monitoring that feed, or if it is being done by a computer system, or if it's even working at all. And that, I think, is where the lack of trust has come into, and people have become increasingly concerned. We hear repeatedly over the last number of years where the rollout of smart motorways has increased about cars that have stopped on a live lane. They haven't been able to make it to a refuge area, and yet the signs hadn't been updated. And that's why there's been a fundamental lack of trust.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Amanda, I mean, you're always out and about on the road. Obviously, there's a stretch of the M1 I drive up and down every day, just before Junction 11, heading north. And there's a smart motorway stretch, and whether it is hard shoulder or an active lane, every single day I see somebody drive down it. Every day. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out someone's going to die on that at some point.
Exactly, and this is the problem. I mean, I do think my one concern about the sweeping ban on smart motorways is that it hasn't actually addressed the fundamental problem, or problems, I should say. The first being why they were introduced in the first place. This is to ease congestion because we have this fundamental problem. But the second is how we're actually going to solve and reinstate trust in the smart motorways that we have currently got running, and the final two that are going to continue because they are more than 3/4 complete at the moment. The government have said they're going to increase the number of refuge areas, which is also great. But of course, you've got to think that probably 80% or 70% of road users who have licenses and cars on the road today actually passed their driving test before smart motorways were ever a thing. So unless they have actually been educating themselves on the rules and legislation around smart motorways, then there's no guarantee they actually know what they're supposed to be doing.
Valid point.
Yeah, well, lots of you getting in touch on Twitter this morning. Karen says, thank goodness smart motorways are dumb and dangerous. Freya on Twitter, whoever asked them needs investigating. They've caused people to die. It was obvious that they were death traps. And Domino on Twitter says, a colossal waste of money, time and energy. They spent years implementing this utter garbage. We've paid for them. The elites continue to use helicopters.
Well, yes, they do, I suppose. Can't be that many people who've got a helicopter.
Well, yeah. It just seemed like most people are very, very supportive of smart motorways being scrapped, all saying they were a ridiculous idea in the first place and they are dangerous. Keep those views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, after more than a year of fighting in Ukraine, just how long will the international community keep supporting Kyiv? Well, the Foreign Secretary is proving our mettle today as he makes more commitments at the G7 meeting in Japan.
But it also comes over huge concern over what China is planning for Taiwan. Well, joining us now is our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Good morning to you, Olivia. So the message from James Cleverly is going to be quite clear at this meeting, isn't it? It's going to be, we support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Yes, absolutely. And the noises coming from the other G7 counterparts to James Cleverly are very similar. The problem, though, for quite a lot of these politicians is that in some countries, support for Ukraine is beginning to ebb, not because people feel that it's not a valid cause and that people of Ukraine need our help, but in some countries it's felt that the cost of living is just getting so high that giving more money to Ukraine with seemingly no end in sight is just making life very difficult for the people at home. So that fight that James Cleverly is bringing to the table at G7 might be about to get a bit harder for him.
Yeah, how difficult is it going to be to sell that message back here at home then? Because I guess it's all about the consequences of us not taking action, us not supporting that mission.
Absolutely, and I think in the UK, actually, support for Ukraine, poll after poll shows that support for Ukraine is still very high and that the British people are keen to keep giving aid to Ukraine. But it's not universal by any means, and there are people who feel as though the cost of living is obviously exacerbated by very high energy prices, and there are some people in the UK and elsewhere in the Western world who feel that the longer this war goes on, the more we help Ukraine, the more this drags out, the longer our energy prices will stay high. Of course, the other option, if it would be to let Russia win, wouldn't exactly bring down energy prices quickly either, but that doesn't necessarily translate in the minds of voters. The thinking can be just, well, while this war goes on, we can see our cost of living high. Shouldn't politicians be more worried about the people here at home and be giving us more help rather than signing over these big sums of money to Ukraine? So at the moment, James Cleverly's job is relatively easy, but in the near future, it might get harder, and the government will have to keep coming up with very good messaging to keep reminding the British people why it is so important to keep giving that aid to Ukraine.
And if the G7 agree with James Cleverly, they think that support should continue for as long as it takes. That is a marked shift from their position last year when they were encouraging Ukraine to enter talks with Russia to try and end the war. Now it's, we will back you for as long as it takes, and that aid will just keep on coming.
Absolutely, and it's a very impressive showing from Ukraine, really, over the last year, that the G7 has changed its minds so quickly. Last year, it was felt as though the defeat of Ukraine was pretty much inevitable, and that the best that Zelensky could do would be to enter into talks. A year later, and we're seeing Russian troops falling at a rate that was completely unexpected. We've seen times when Ukraine have succeeded in seizing back bits of territory from Russia, and it is by no means certain at all that Russia will win this war, and that is why the West is now saying, yes, we will give you the help. The West is now seeing that the help goes a long way and could actually mean that the defeat eventually, perhaps, of Vladimir Putin and his regime in Russia. So that's a huge change, and it'll be very satisfying for Zelensky to see.
What are you doing out and about in Ukraine today, Olivia? I have to say, it
Ukraine.
looks... Did I say Ukraine?
You did.
Oh,
Ukraine
Gravesend, I meant. Oh.
Not quite Ukraine.
No, honestly, that's my brain freezing, Olivia, this morning. There you go, another coffee required. What are you doing in Gravesend? Because it looks quintessentially English with the cobbled street behind you.
It does. I'm on a lovely Gravesend High Street, and I'm here for the People's Panel on Camilla Tominey's show at 9:30. I'll be talking to a panel of GB News viewers about what they make of the biggest political stories of the day, and they'll get their chance to ask questions to the politicians who Camilla is interviewing.
Lovely. Great stuff. We'll look forward to that at 9:30.
Thank you, Olivia.
Olivia, thank you.
Enjoy Gravesend. It looks beautiful.
Gravesend. Isn't it awful? Do you ever get that at home where you say, someone says, "What have you said?" and you have no idea that you've said it?
Would you have not known that?
I wouldn't have known.
Olivia, how's Ukraine?
How's Ukraine? I mean, because I was thinking, ask her why she's in Gravesend.
Yeah.
I like
and we're
Gravesend.
talking about Ukraine. I can see why that happened.
Yeah, but it's the fact that you don't realise you've done it.
No.
That's weird, isn't it? But the brain is a weird thing. Oh, we were talking about frozen food earlier on. More and more of us are buying frozen food rather than fresh, because it's basically cheaper, especially on things like fruit. And I was saying we buy frozen berries.
Oh, yeah.
For the smoothies. And thank heavens for Jane, who's a food safety trainer. Morning to you, Jane. She says, be very eaten. Be very eaten.
Well, what are you up to?
I don't know. Jack, coffee, please.
He needs another coffee.
Be very careful eating frozen berries that are not cooked. Read the packaging.
Oh.
A lot of them come from overseas and they're unwashed as they're made to produce in a pie, to put it in pie. This would then go in the oven and it would kill any bacteria. Freezing bacteria doesn't kill it, so don't use them in smoothies. If berries are sold specifically for smoothies, you're fine, as these have been well washed.
Oh.
So you've got to look out for the packaging, because you can imagine then berries for smoothies are going to be more expensive because they've been washed.
You've got to do some reading when you get in there.
So it's fine for the pie, not good for smoothies.
Kathleen's been in touch about frozen chopped onions. We were asking questions about
I
that.
quite fancy a bag of them.
Now, they are more expensive than fresh, she says, but they are more convenient. No sore eyes or runny nose.
Well, I can put up with that if it's cheaper.
Well,
But
you're not going to buy frozen then, are you?
No, I'm not, but thanks for that, Kathleen.
Thanks, Kathleen.
It's all about the money.
And Dave says, in the 60s onward, we were buying large portions of meat that made it cheap and high quality. I think he means frozen, does it? Yes.
Oh.
Now marketing is taking top cuts of beef out of our price range. Frozen is fresher, and we find it's mostly better quality for the money.
So as a lot of people, though, having a chest freezer was not unusual. Certainly, like in the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
a lot of people had a chest freezer. We had a big chest freezer, and they've sort of they've gone out of fashion. People don't tend to have a freezer in the garage anymore.
No, my granny has a freezer
Someone
in the
saying
hall.
to me, Amirs, what's a chest freezer?
Oh, dear.
Like you say,
the big
youth
ones
of today.
And you can open it like this.
Yeah.
And you delve in.
You delve in,
Yeah.
you get very disorganised.
Just
there,
like
don't
that. But it means you can store things.
you? Loads.
Yeah, and you're right, very popular. My granny's got a chest freezer in her hallway.
Hallway?
Yeah, because the kitchen's full, she's got freezers there, and then she's got one in the hallway. It's like a very long hallway, a little freezer at the end.
Oh.
Yeah, she loves a freezer. It is a very random place to have one, I can appreciate that.
Sorry, Granny.
Yeah, sorry. Called you out now, national TV.
She'll be watching, won't she?
Yeah, she will actually. Hi, Dot, if you're watching.
Dot, it's a disgrace, Dot. Get it shifted in the
Oh, no, she loves a freezer. Do keep your thoughts coming in, though. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots of you getting in touch on a whole host of our stories today. Joe Biden, we're talking about in the paper review. He is, according to some of the papers, running for a second term. Ruth says Joe Biden clearly isn't running the USA, but who is? He is just a figurehead. It's like Mad King George again. And Liam says Biden is an utter disgrace. We have a fool at the helm who should be kept away from the public eye.
Oh, I think that's harsh. I do think that's harsh. Amy is a Virginian living in Fife. She says, as an American, what some people forget is you spent Biden's term terrified he wouldn't see it through and Kamala Harris would step up. That's a chilling prospect. She's been useless. The problem is with Kamala Harris, I think, is with any VP, actually, is that certainly on this side of the pond, we never hear anything about them. And so we know they're there, but we don't know what they're doing. If any, so you don't get a take on if they're good, bad or indifferent. So I don't know.
But certainly, I think a lot of people in the US, when she became VP for Biden, they thought, I wish it could be her. You know, young, female.
But it's not quite lived up to the spec.
Not quite lived up to the spec.
Very difficult. I just think, and it's no disrespect for whoever candidate you would go for if it ends up being Biden-Trump, which it could well be.
Biden DeSantis, maybe?
Whoever you'd prefer, you know, beside the point, they're too old. They're too old. I mean, Trump's going to be 80. Biden's going to be older than that. He's slightly older than Trump.
Yeah.
I think he's too old.
Well, if he gets the second term, he'll be 85, Biden. He's 80 now. Is that right? Yeah, 24. Yeah, 85.
It's just
86.
It's too much.
Yeah, it's
that's
a
not
stressful job.
And it's not being ageist. It is. It's a 24-hour-a-day job.
Lots of travel.
You know, and it's just you've got to be up to it. You need to be. I mean, I wouldn't want to. Well, I suppose I could just about do it at nearly 50. But I mean, you wouldn't want to. How old was Obama?
40s, wasn't he?
Very on the ball. I actually saw. We're watching that. I don't know if you've seen the doco. It's on Netflix actually about the Boston Marathon bombing.
Ooh.
Which, oddly enough, we watched episode 1 last night. I remember covering it, and it was 10 years ago yesterday.
Wow.
That it happened, and it's and there's this bit of Obama coming out and making statements and things, and you just look at it and go, well, those were the good old days.
Oh, really? It was a stark difference.
Yeah.
To what we're seeing now.
You know, just the way he handles himself, what he's saying, the compassion, you know, and again, that's nothing to do with the politics of it. That's to do with acting presidentially within a moment.
Yeah.
Right?
He stood up to the plate, didn't he?
You know, and I just think that's what we're missing. And you need a bit of youth and vim and vigour for that. Not to say that you don't benefit from the experience of being older, but it's a tough job.
It's a tough job, and many would say you are past it, really. You're past your prime, aren't you, at 80, 85?
Why would you want to be doing it?
Why would you want to? Would you just not want to retire? Have a nice, easy life in the country somewhere. Let us know what you think. Keep those views coming in on any of the topics that we're talking about today, whether it be the Grand National, Joe Biden, smart motorways. Keep them coming. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
It's 18 minutes past 8. Also today, Labour's promising to double the number of doctors trained every year to 15,000. The party says appointments are currently a postcode lottery, with up to 3 in 4 patients in some parts of England unable to see the GP of their choice. It would also guarantee face-to-face appointments for patients who want them if it wins the next general election.
The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says fresh nurses' strikes would have a deeply concerning impact. The government's under pressure to prevent the most extreme strike yet, after members of the RCN rejected a 5% pay rise. NHS nurses in emergency departments, intensive care and cancer wards will take industrial action for the first time. The 48-hour walkout will begin on the 30th of April, but 74% of Unison members voted to accept the same offer.
Police in Merseyside say nearly 120 people were arrested after the disruption at the Grand National. They crossed the track at Aintree. It's been called reckless. The disruption caused a 12-minute delay to the start of the race, which was eventually won by Corrock Rambler. The Animal Rising Group says it's cruel, with 62 horses dying over the past 23 years. You were going to look at that poll.
I was.
weren't you?
Is that all right?
Yeah,
I'll
go
just do
on.
a very quick check.
I might just have it here.
Oh, you might. Oh, here we go. Got it.
Right.
OK, so we're asking today, should we ban horse racing? Is it cruel to animals, or is it a great British tradition? Perhaps you lie somewhere in between. 76% said we should keep it. 24% said we should ban it. That's on our Twitter pile. There are
I've got 3,805 listed on mine.
OK. Lots of you getting involved in that poll. Do keep them coming in.
Interesting, though, it's not significantly shifted. It's all, you know... It's
been the same since about 6 o'clock this morning, hasn't it?
Yeah, 3/4 roughly saying keep it.
I want to hear, if you're saying keep it, why? Why should we keep it? Because the people who are saying ban it, they're saying, you know, we're not treating horses right, they're dying, or something needs to change, such as those fences. But
Yeah.
I haven't heard yet why you feel so passionately that we should keep horse racing. Let's get those views in.
Trevor from West Yorkshire says, I'm not comfortable with holding a sporting event that kills horses. However, most of the protesters are not genuine animal lovers. Some are wearing Just Stop Oil bibs. So let's call out these so-called protesters for what they are, anarchists. That might apply to some. It won't apply to all. You do get it in all of these protests. You always have the regular protesters who just turn up because they want to protest. It doesn't mean that there isn't an underlying group who actually believe in what they're doing. But yeah, Just Stop Oil. I mean, what's that got to do with horse racing? Not a lot, I would suggest.
But Animal Rising certainly feel as though they had a point to make yesterday. Almost 300 of them turned out at Aintree. 120 arrested. 9 made it onto the track. It certainly was very dangerous. But the police did manage to get a hold of it, and only 15 minutes delayed. But we are going to have 8. Yeah, 15 minutes delayed.
No, but so we're talking about it, though, aren't we?
We are talking about
which
it.
is
what they want.
You know, perhaps that's fair enough. There was no real disruption, and we're talking about it. So
that's a very good point.
Yeah,
we're giving them what they want, aren't we?
Well, it's not wrong to talk about it, is it?
But as you say, it overshadows the winner, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Don't know the name. Keep your thoughts, your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, the Prime Minister will return to Belfast this week for more events to celebrate 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement.
Rishi Sunak is meant to give a speech on Wednesday at a major conference before joining volunteers and community workers at a special gala dinner.
Well, joining us now is our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie. Good morning to you, Dougie. So Rishi Sunak will be back in Northern Ireland. We're expecting him to make a keynote speech at the Queen's University later on. What are we expecting him to say?
Well, good morning and welcome to Queen's University in Belfast. And yes, we've had one American president, now we've got another one with Bill Clinton. He will be in the audience when Rishi Sunak addresses that audience, and he will talk about the bravery of those that were involved in the Good Friday Agreement. He will be saying what risks they took in bringing their people forward. But really what he does forget is all of the people that were involved in the Good Friday Agreement were very much in the room that day, and at this minute in time those in the framework document weren't.
Yeah, look, it does make me wonder, why is all this still going on, Dougie? We celebrated things last week and then we had the presidential visit. Why is this still going on?
Well, these events were set in place months ago because they did believe with the framework document that everything would be OK and everybody would be back into power in Northern Ireland. But of course, that's not the case. The killing side of what happened here 25 years ago has most definitely stopped, but the political side has most definitely also stopped. And that is a problem for the Good Friday Agreement over those issues around consent.
There is going to be a gala dinner there tonight as well, isn't there, Dougie, where we hear there's going to be a younger generation of volunteers who really have made outstanding contributions to their communities.
Very much so, and that is very welcome. I mean, my own children would never have known a bomb or a bullet going off in Northern Ireland, and they're 24 years of age. And as a reporter and a member of the media, I would have been in the thick of it, and many's a night never thought, well, sometimes question we actually getting home or not. And it is good to see that those people are growing up in a new Northern Ireland, are driving things forward. But at the very part of it, it is all done around consent, and that is missing in Northern Ireland. And hopefully we can get that back on track within the next maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And it may be, and some people in Northern Ireland are looking towards this generation thinking more than Joe Biden's visit. They're thinking, I wonder, can Bill Clinton and Tony Blair, etc., maybe pull something out of the hat and bring people alongside and say, look, this is where we were 25 years ago, this is where we are now, and maybe push things forward. So in a lot of ways, people in Northern Ireland are looking more towards this particular gathering than they were of what happened here last week.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, Dougie, actually, because the idea that this can be used as an occasion to actually say, look, as you say, we've sorted out the violence, but we haven't sorted out the peace. Why do you think there could be movement in the next 2 or 3 weeks? I mean, does it look like the DUP may be prepared to say, look, well, We'll sort it once we're back in place, get it up and running, and then perhaps we can then discuss the issues around, well, not the protocol now, though, the Windsor framework and all that sort of thing.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the DUP or any unionist really will go back into power. All unionist parties are against this. Only one of them are saying that they would go back in, and they're the small, very small size of unionism. But why it might be better here and round the fringes here is because of one word: trust. There is trust between those that negotiated the Good Friday Agreement 25 years ago, and those players are back in these rooms behind us. Those meetings on the side may actually bring more to fruition than what has been happening. This constant pressure on unionists to try and bounce them back into government. They just simply don't trust the Europeans, and they definitely do not trust the Tory party, because they've been brought down a road so many times and nothing has come out of it. So it may be that these dinners here may start to grow little shoots of what's coming along.
So you talk there about trust and not trusting the Europeans, not trusting the Tories. Do they trust the Americans? Because there's been a lot of American influence in the past couple of weeks. We obviously had Biden's trip this week. We're looking ahead to another visit from the Clintons this week. And how do you think Biden's comments, especially those dangling a carrot about US investment, how far do you think that will go, especially with the DUP?
Well, the carrot and investment is really, when you read the framework document, there's things like state aid that are not allowed in Northern Ireland because it's against European. It would give an unfair advantage. There's higher corporation tax in Britain than there is in the Republic. All of those things, anybody that has read that agreement will know fine rightly that foreign direct investment from the United States, and United States businessmen they want at least 7.5% on a bond coming in, and they're not going to get that in a country that can't get goods in and out, that has no state aid in it. That's not going to happen for them. And most people know that. So those jobs that you would be looking at there, that they're talking about, would be mainly in the service sector. And that is not only what in Northern Ireland doesn't need. Young men especially need manufacturing jobs right across the UK. They are the lost side of society at this minute in time, and they need stability. And really, that's where those jobs need to come from. But the trust in here with the Americans and those that set up the Good Friday Agreement, Ali, there is trust there amongst the unionist community and the nationalist community, and it may be that they can have a quiet word in the right ear.
Well, let's hope so. Doogie, thanks very much indeed. It's what, we need to get Arlene on.
Yeah, we do.
We need to get Arlene, because sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes when you look at what's going on in Northern Ireland and all this hoo-ha, right, and the fact that DUP won't get back into power sharing and all the rest of it, you just want to say, just get on with it. Get on with it.
We'll get Arlene on the phone.
Get back in there, sort it out. And at least then the people of Northern Ireland will benefit from having a functioning assembly, a functioning government, basically. Get on with it. The problem is there's a lot more going on that the rest of us don't get necessarily. And Arlene, as former First Minister, of course, knows it all.
She's the woman in the know, isn't she? But if you're living in Northern Ireland now, you'll be hoping that finally, surrounding all of this 25-year anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, we can make some headway. Let's continue with getting some good out of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Do get in touch if you're in Northern Ireland or what you make of all of that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And can I just say as well, Queen's University looking absolutely beautiful behind Doogie, which I did see on my trip to Belfast, and I had to get that in there.
Oh, did you?
Am I over it? No, I'm not.
No, you're not, are you?
No. Belfast, fantastic. If you get a chance, do go.
Didn't invite me. You're on the blooming Tourist Commission Board, aren't you?
No, it was wonderful. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it was just brilliant. Really good city. I do really recommend.
It was recommended by, I nearly called you Ellie McGee then. Despite the fact I've got a new cup of tea and my brain still isn't functioning properly. There you go. Aidan McGee is going to be here up next with all the very latest on the sports news. This is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
8:33, this is Breakfast. Good to have you with us this morning. We were just saying before, talking to Doogie outside
Queen's University in Belfast.
There you go. And as we came out, I said, it's so confusing. Why doesn't the DUP just get back in? Why isn't power sharing restored? Why can't they solve these issues that they have once they're operating again, which is better for the people of Northern Ireland? And what did I say? I said it's very complex. We need Arlene Foster in.
And then what happened?
Guess what? She walked in. So there you go. One of our colleagues here, of course, and of course, former First Minister, which is crucial in all this, because you understand this better than anybody else in this, probably anyone in a 20-mile radius at least from here, and that includes Westminster. What is going on? Why is it that the DUP are so adamant that they will not go back into power and get this up and running again?
OK, so I'm not going to go back to the very start, but I will go back to the protocol which causes checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Rishi Sunak negotiated the Windsor Framework. He said that dealt with that issue of checks, dealt with other issues. Unfortunately, the DUP don't believe that it does fully deal with the issue of checks. And I think they still have a number of issues they need to have sorted with the Prime Minister. I think the Prime Minister can deal with those matters. But because we've had the Belfast Agreement commemorations last week and this week again, that means there's a sort of a hiatus in the real politics at the moment. And I think once those commemorations are finished, I think that you'll see more talks and conversations happening again.
Because what about the people of Northern Ireland? Don't they want to see this all up and running again, even if there are problems with the trading agreements and all the rest of it?
We see the difficulty is if you go back into government, you're actually implementing those checks. And for unionists, you're basically saying that Northern Ireland's separate and different from the rest of the UK, and you're having to check goods coming in from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. So there is a need to get those things sorted so that ministers can get on with their jobs.
Arlene, I wanted to ask you about the American influence in all of this. What did you make of Biden's trip this week? Because Jeffrey Donaldson of the DUP was quite surprised, it seemed, by his remarks in Belfast. He said they appeared balanced. That's his thoughts. And Biden was also dangling that carrot, wasn't he, of US investment. Do you think that will make a difference when it comes to restoring power sharing?
Well, the United States are the biggest investors in Northern Ireland from a foreign direct investment point of view. So they're a very, very important market for us. So that will continue, I think, into the future. And whether the Windsor Framework means that there's more investment into Northern Ireland, only time will tell. I mean, the Americans have always been there in the background. They're not co-guarantors or whatever. It's always been the UK government working with the Irish government and the parties in Northern Ireland. And the Americans have always been there in the background. Bill Clinton, Tony Blair would say, has played a very good role in terms of the Belfast Agreement. He's always been there to try and influence and try and be supportive. And it was interesting that Tony Blair said just before President Biden arrived that he needed to be careful and he needed to be sensitive. And so the speech in Belfast from President Biden was balanced. It mentioned Ulster Scots. It mentioned the fact that there were a number of presidents who came from that background as well as from the Irish nationalist background. So it was interesting that his speech was so very balanced and scripted because, of course, he hasn't always been on message in relation to Northern Ireland.
No, he hasn't, has he? Do you hold out hope, as you say, this could be, in a sense, a catalyst? Do you hold out any hope that we could see the restoration of power sharing any time soon? Because you say the big stumbling block is what is now the Windsor Framework, right? There's no way of getting that renegotiated from scratch. So, but could it be tweaked?
No, it's not a question of renegotiating it with the European Union. I think most people accept that there's no chance of the European Union coming back to the table. But the Prime Minister could do some things, particularly around the Constitution, for example, because I was part of a court case against the Northern Ireland Protocol, and the Supreme Court ruled that the protocol suspended parts of the Act of Union. So the Prime Minister could deal with that in Parliament if he chose to do so, and he could deal with some of the issues around the green and red lanes, so-called, coming across into Northern Ireland. So I think that there are conversations to be had, but as I say, because of the commemorations and everything that's been going on, there's been a bit of a hiatus in Northern Ireland.
Do you know what? I will never quite... I know I've said this to you before, Arlene, but I've interviewed you as First Minister. And I can never get over the fact that now we can just have a chat. Do you know what I mean?
A fireside chat.
And we can wish you into the studio.
But it's just the fact that it is so complex, and there is obviously you have so much knowledge on this, and we can explain it to people in a way that you can never do when you're in power.
Well, Stephen, one of the reasons I got involved in GBNews was to try and bring some of Northern Ireland to the rest of the UK without it always being about conflict, to have these sorts of conversations, and GBNews has allowed me to do that, and I hope to continue doing that.
Oh, you will. And you're on air at 11 this morning.
I'm on at 11, yes. I'm filling in for Michael Portillo this morning, and we're covering everything from Mary Quant to Emmanuel Macron.
Oh, I wonder which one will be more spicy. Ali, really good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Thank you very much.
You see? Makes sense.
Very
of it now.
good.
Now you've got a better idea of what's going on, what the issues are.
That was like magic.
Love it.
Honestly, that's all it took. One ad break, and we had Arlene Foster next to us. Wonderful.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
I'm wishing for Aidan McGee now. Bang. Here he is.
Here he is.
Morning. How are you?
Not too bad. You got a bone to pick with me, I believe.
Let's talk Grand National, should we?
Yeah, we've got a bone to pick.
Because for a kick-off, you tipped Mr. Mr. Incredible
I did explain.
10 of my English pounds down the Swanwick.
Yeah, that's a horrible afternoon for you, I imagine, isn't it? Really painful. But no, in all seriousness, I did say if I got any right, I'd remind you. If I got any wrong, don't talk about it.
Oh yeah.
All right. He unseated his rider.
Yeah.
So very, very difficult. Harry Redknapp's horse back on the lash, pulled up as well. Only 17 horses finished from a field of 39. There was one fatality as well. Yeah. And so I think there's pressure going on this race every year. Rightly or wrongly. But 118 arrests of protesters as well.
And that's overshadowed the event.
It has, yeah, and it's getting more and more every year. I mean, it's not the first time we've seen protests, but it seems to be more of a talking point each year. We can see pictures there of protesters being towed away or taken away by police for the benefit of our radio listeners there. So, yeah, I just wonder for the future of the race, if this noise goes louder and louder every year, there may have to be decisions taken. And if it has to be, maybe it could go to a flat race one year, I don't know. I just don't think that would be very agreeable to the purists who prefer the jumps. It is a national hunt event, of course.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying yesterday there were obviously great concerns about security, but it does look as though the police handled it very quickly.
They did. Well, there were actually the racegoers were involved in some of the in quelling some of the protest. And but I say 17 horses finishing. Great story though. We should remark on the sport as well. I mean, Derek Fox is a fantastic story with the guy who won on Korak Rambler. I mean, 8-1 favourite. I did say as well that this is one of my predictions that I've got right. The higher the pedigree of the horse, you're seeing them winning the national now. You're seeing it's quite the lottery that it used to be. It's rare that you get anything outside of 20 to 1. Going close in the race. But he was doing press-ups on the morning yesterday with the GP to be past fit because he fell or suffered a minor injury at Wetherby earlier in the week. Good story around Lucinda Russell as well, the trainer. She actually trained a horse to victory in 2017, and she lost that horse 3 weeks ago to colic, and she scattered some of the ashes by the winning post yesterday. So quite a poignant day for her. Yeah. Noble Yates finished 4th. Gaillard de Mainil finished 3rd. So, yeah, look, it was in terms of the sport, it was good all round. Disappointing that only 17 finished. But I just think the noise every year is growing around this race, and I think you will see changes in years to come.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Premier League?
Fantastic day yesterday, yeah. I mean, it was full of stories. Brighton going to Chelsea, winning by 2-1. I don't think Brighton had ever won at Stamford Bridge, and they did it yesterday. Yeah. Chelsea now 17 points off the top 4, I believe. Brighton right in contention. Good results for Man United yesterday, even though they didn't play because they've had a horrible week with that Europa League draw against Sevilla in the week, losing players to injury as well. But Newcastle lost, who were once one place above them in the Premier League. Tottenham losing at home to Bournemouth, disastrous result for them. I mean, the signs were there last week when they just narrowly overcame Brighton due to a VAR fast. But yesterday they were beaten in the last minute by Bournemouth. Bournemouth as well. Let's tip our hats to them. 5 wins in the last 9 games, one of the most unfancied teams in the Premier League, 6 points above the bottom 3 now. Man City winning against Leicester in the evening kick-off, 3-1, another 2 goals for Erling Haaland. Arsenal played...
That's a surprise.
Yeah, I know, yeah, exactly. Arsenal play today, the pressure's on them. They go to West Ham at 2 o'clock. Arlene, in fact, was worried about getting her tube back to the airport as well because of all those West Ham fans. But I told them they're probably quite a unionist fan base, so should be all right.
I was about to say, is she heading to the football?
No, she's not heading to the football. No, she's worried about the travel. But I've assured her as often.
As you do, you're kind soul. What's going on with Roy Hodgson?
Oh, fantastic again. I mean,
he's doing well, isn't he?
An ex-QPR player bailing him out yesterday, scoring 2 goals down at Southampton. That's 3 wins out of 3. And you have to wonder, don't you? I mean, sometimes these clubs sack managers so often now that they run out of options and go back to the bloke who was doing quite a good job in the first place. Yeah. Now, if he keeps going on like that and they keep winning matches, they're going to have a very difficult decision in the summer because the deal is to the end of the season. I could see Roy in charge next season as well. Yeah. And who would have thought that? That's a hell of a story. 75 years old.
Sorry, we've got to mention QPR.
Oh, goodness me. Yeah, I know.
Not good.
3-0 at home to Coventry. We're in real relegation danger now. But I had some good news. I got a £500 bid on the picture that we exhibited yesterday, and I expect the bidding ends tonight at midnight. I'm expecting it to go higher as well.
Good. And that's for the
that's for the picture. Yeah, that's right. It's for the Tiger Cubs. Yeah, the Down syndrome. The QPR's down. It's a Down syndrome football team for young people with Down syndrome and children as well. The gentleman who bid yesterday, he has a Down syndrome daughter, so he's from Brentwood in Essex. So because the bid is so high, I'm going to deliver it in person.
Oh, yeah. Quite right. I think that's...
I've got to find a big enough car first. But...
Yeah, and get a picture for us as well.
Yes, I will. I might have to borrow Stephen's Cadillac.
Yeah.
Right. Aidan, thanks very much. Ian.
Thanks.
I'm glad that's going well. I love to see money race for a good cause like that.
Brilliant.
Lovely.
Brilliant. And lovely that it's a cause so close to his heart as well, having a daughter with Down syndrome. Lovely.
Now, still to come this morning, we've got all the news and views from the Sunday newspapers. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Breakfast at 8:49. Let's take you through a quick run through the papers with Tom Slater and Candice Holdsworth this morning. Good to see you both. Candice, let's have a look at the Sun on Sunday.
Yes, this is a very tragic story. This is in Sun on Sunday about the baby boy Finlay Bowden, whose parents tortured him to death. Oh. And MP Nigel Mills has come out and criticised social services over it, actually, because he was placed back in their care and afterwards died. But I think this comes in a long line of cases now that we've been hearing about. So, you know, Logan Mwangi, Arthur Labinjo Hughes, Star Hobson, where people are saying there's actually big failures in social services. They were warned, they were told by family members, by members of the community that something was going wrong in these homes, and nothing happened. And, you know, some people have said that maybe they should face penalties for when there's big failings. I'm not sure. I think you have to be very careful with the sort of incentives you create.
Yeah.
If things are too onerous, it might incentivize people to make very conservative decisions when they don't need to, especially when you're dealing with individual cases. But I think that this is a bit of a pattern now, and it does need to be explored.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
The
problem is, Tom, with this is, when we read it like this, it appears very black and white. And at the time, clearly there's been some cock-up, frankly, somewhere. But at the time, it must be much more complex.
Of course. And, you know, as Candice rightly says, you don't want to create a situation in which the state is almost over-empowered to intervene in family life and so on. That has its own obvious downsides. But at the same time, when you see the amount of stories in which you could have teachers, you would have family members, you would have members of the community all raising alarm and then nothing is done, or in situations where, again, the child is handed back to the parents in question, it's hard not to see this as just like a fundamental failure, really.
Yeah.
Well, it's missed opportunities, isn't it? And in this case, it's the right checkups not being done. It's that follow-up as well. It's a very, very distressing story. Tom, let's head over to the Mail, shall we? And this is about the ULEZ war in London.
And whether or not it's going to hit Labour's election hopes. So apparently lots of people internally in the Labour Party are irritated with Sadiq Khan for extending the ULEZ because of the fact that there are certain seats that they're very keen to pick up, particularly not necessarily in Greater London, just outside of it, but will be affected by it because of the fact that in places like Thurrock or Dartford and so on, there's going to be people who are going to have to drive into London for work. And the thing about the ULEZ is that it is something which particularly punishes working-class people, people who drive for a living.
People who haven't got a new car.
Exactly, because of the fact that you have to have purchase one that's either, 2005 or after if it's petrol, 2012, I think, and after if it's diesel. And this is something which is increasingly going to be a problem because of the fact that it's going to hit people in terms of living standards, and particularly in parts of the world. If you think about Greater London, these are not places with great transport links.
No.
These are not places in which people can just happily kind of hop on a bus or a tube or whatever. And it has this knock-on effect for people who drive into London for work and so on. So, again, concern from the Labour Party that this is going to actually hurt their efforts in just outside of London, and questions again as to why is he doing this, other than for reasons of ideology or also, another way in which money can be generated, basically.
Well, yeah, you do wonder, don't you? But money from the wrong people, money from the people who really can't afford it. Candice, in the Sunday Times this morning, an investigation into 650 breast cancer deaths.
I mean, this is another grim story. So this story in the Sunday Times, it's about a surgeon called Ian Patterson, who I think it was between the years of 1997 to about 2001, operated on women who didn't have anything wrong with them, performed mastectomies, they went through chemotherapy. I mean,
nothing wrong with them.
There was nothing wrong with them. He was performing. Basically, they think it may have been for money, but also he had some psychological things going on. But now there's an inquest into a number of deaths that they think he may have been linked to. Women that he performed surgery on who died, and did it lead to their deaths? I just find this so appalling. I mean, he was a leading breast surgeon. He was respected. These women trusted him. And apparently it took quite a long time before people started raising concerns and red flags. They were worried. They didn't want to question this eminent surgeon and the things that he was doing, even though it was quite obvious that something wasn't right.
I mean, it's terrifying, frankly.
It is.
It is terrifying.
Sadistic.
But look, on that note, we do have to leave it. Tom Slater, Candice Holdsworth, good to see you both this morning.
Thank you
for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, smart motorways scrapped. But what about the ones we've already got in place? We'll be asking. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Craig Snell. Here is your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, as we go through the next few days, a good deal of cloud around actually for most of us today, but the brighter skies are set to return as we go into next week. So here's the situation at the moment. We've got high pressure trying to move in across the country, but these two weather fronts are a focus of some cloud and some outbreaks of rain, especially across western parts today. You can see this on the graphics, quite a grey start across many western areas, some outbreaks of rain, especially across Scotland, Wales, southwest England. Towards the east, we have some brightness, also some mist and fog around first thing. And as we go through the course of the day, generally a lot of England and Wales remaining fairly cloudy with some damp conditions. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it should brighten up as the day goes on. Some sunshine developing, but that may just trigger a few showers too. But in the sunshine, feeling quite warm here, highs of 17 degrees, but still feeling a little bit disappointing really, where that cloud lingers throughout the day across England and Wales. Into the evening, a lot of us turned dry as any rain generally fizzles out as we approach midnight. Some clear spells developing too, especially across eastern parts of England, northern parts of Scotland. So here we could just see a touch of frost as we start Monday morning. But for most of us under the cloud cover, no real problems with temperatures overnight. So going into Monday, a bright start for East Anglia, southeastern England, but actually here some cloud may return as the day goes on. So the best of the sunshine, I think, on Monday across parts of the Midlands, central, southern England, northern Scotland also doing quite well, and then eventually also Northern Ireland too. And it's here where we'll see the highest of the temperatures on Monday. Could potentially see 18, 19, possibly 20 degrees in some sheltered spots of Scotland in the sunshine. And generally, if you do see the sunshine, feeling fairly pleasant. And a very similar day is in store as we go into Tuesday. Again, warmest of the weather up across northwestern Scotland. And then come Wednesday, generally cloudier for most of us, but again, temperatures not doing too badly for the time of year.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have.
No one will be cancelled.
Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Today, smart motorways are scrapped. The government pulls the plug on building any more, but the AA says we need to ditch the ones we already have.
End of the line. The UK leg of the Orient Express is axed, with operators blaming post-Brexit border checks. And stick to singing. BBC bosses warn the UK's Eurovision entrant to keep quiet on politics.
Sunday, the 16th of April. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, plans for new smart motorways are on the scrap heap after a major government climb down.
Yes, the controversial setup has been blamed for numerous deaths as hard shoulders are turned into extra lanes at busy times. But the ones we already have won't be going anywhere yet. The AA is demanding, though, that they are scrapped immediately.
Well, earlier we spoke to the former racing driver Amanda Stretton.
Originally, they were brought to easing congestion, but at the time of their introduction, there was very little education about what this actually meant. And there was a lot of confusion with people about whether they were allowed to use the smart motorway or not, because, of course, prior to that, spending any time in the hard shoulder, unless you were broken down, was not permitted. But over time, smart motorways have evolved and changed, and the technology that has gone into monitoring them has been improved. But as we know from nearly 39 deaths, it seriously has not been improved enough.
I mean, they are dangerous. There's no denying that. So that there has been an issue of confusion, as you say. People don't know if they're able to use them. There's also been an issue of trust, hasn't there? Drivers not trusting in the smart motorway and the messaging that they're giving.
That's right. That's because the technology that was used to monitor them in the beginning relied on a human being actually looking at cameras. That was then updated so that it was then done automatically by computer systems. So as a road user, you're unaware if somebody is actually monitoring that feed, or if it is being done by a computer system, or if it's even working at all. And that, I think, is where the lack of trust has come into, and people have become increasingly concerned. We hear repeatedly over the last number of years where the rollout of smart motorways has increased about cars that have stopped on a live lane. They haven't been able to make it to a refuge area, and yet the signs hadn't been updated. And that's why there's been a fundamental lack of trust.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I mean, you're always out and about on the road. Obviously, there's a stretch of the M1 I drive up and down every day, just before Junction 11, heading north, and there's a smart motorway stretch. And whether it is hard shoulder or an active lane, every single day I see somebody drive down it. Every day. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out someone's going to die on that at some point.
Exactly, and this is the problem. I mean, I do think my one concern about the sweeping ban on smart motorways is that it hasn't actually addressed the fundamental problem, or problems, I should say. The first being why they were introduced in the first place. This is to ease congestion because we have this fundamental problem. But the second is how we're actually going to solve and reinstate trust in the smart motorways that we have currently got running, and the final 2 that are going to continue because they are more than 3/4 complete at the moment. The government have said they're going to increase the number of refuge areas, which is also great. But of course, you've got to think that probably 80% or 70% of road users who have licenses and cars on the road today actually passed their driving test before smart motorways were ever a thing. So unless they have actually been educating themselves on the rules and legislation around smart motorways, then there's no guarantee they actually know what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, well, not popular, let me tell you. Not popular at all. Where's that one I've got? Linda from Leeds. Hi, Linda. Says, who invented smart motorways? Did they get a big payout? What happened to health and safety and risk assessment? There's nothing smart about them. Well, yeah, I think... But I was going to say it's a fair point. I don't know if it is a fair point. I mean, there must be stuff smart about them. There must be more about them than we don't realise. But I do agree that anyone with an ounce of common sense actually would say doesn't work.
Yeah, similar theme from Sally, who says the person responsible for smart motorways should be held accountable for these deaths. The smart motorways should all be reversed back straight away. We should also use the money for future smart motorways and put them towards potholes and fixing them. I think that would be very popular.
I don't know if £1 billion would fill up all the potholes, would it? I mean, it would go a long way, but it might not actually fill them all.
No,
who knows? Anyway, as you know, coming up after breakfast today is the Camilla Tominey Show, and she's in Westminster for us this morning. Camilla, good to see you. I mean, what are we to make politically of the smart motorways story? Because the Prime Minister has said, yes, I'm listening to the concerns of motorists, but even their own front line says it's going to save us money.
Yeah, I mean, it's also this kind of too little too late thing, isn't it? I mean, the stopping the boats. Well, you've had 13 years. Smart motorways were introduced in 2006 under Labour. How many people, I mean, not just politically, but just members of the public, GB viewers and listeners, you don't need to be a genius to think that they're anything but smart, that they're actually irretrievably stupid to remove a hard shoulder. People have been saying this for years. The Telegraph and other newspapers have been campaigning on it. We've had reporters going undercover, discovering that people aren't even watching these motorways, that they're an accident waiting to happen. We'd covered the deaths that have happened, from adults to young children. In the case of the poor boy that passed away. So how many times has this been flagged? So I think it's welcome. And again, Rishi Sunak's moving in the right direction. But I'm sure people are scratching their heads saying, why didn't you do this 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Camilla, I think you are right, especially based on the views that we've got coming in here this morning. Camilla, another story across many of the front pages today is the disruption of the Grand National yesterday at Aintree. Animal Rising, 118 protesters arrested there. And you were there, weren't you, at Aintree?
I was there. I did have a lovely day at the races yesterday. To be fair, we didn't really see much that was going out the front. When we came in, we could see the protesters, and then we knew that the race had been delayed, but it was quite hard to see close up. That's the funny thing about physically going to the races. You don't see it necessarily as well as you do on the telly. I did get 1 and 2, so I'm quite pleased. I had Vanilla and I had the winning horse, so I made £100, which was nice. I know, to be fair, my husband put the bet on for me, and now he has the winnings. So I'm thinking, right, I'm not sure I'm ever going to see this, Dosh. But anyway, what's his is mine and what's mine is mine. That's married life, exactly. We share all things. But on the National, I mean, the thinking among the very respectable and engaged horse racing community there was that it was completely hypocritical and self-defeating because, of course, the horses were getting distressed by the fact that the protesters were delaying the race, because the timing of those races, it's really, really critical in the preparation of the horses. You're there at race meets, and I do a lot of this because of all of my royal coverage. I've done Cheltenham, Ascot, Epsom most years. Horse racing people care deeply about horses. They care about their welfare. They care about their well-being. Yes, inevitably, sometimes racehorses do die in races. But the idea that these animal rights activists know more about the welfare of horses than people that spend their entire lives breeding them, training them and riding them is for the birds.
Yeah, but it's a legitimate conversation to have, isn't it? And if nothing else, we're having it.
Yeah, we can have the conversation. I just don't think the methods. It's ever the case, isn't it, Stephen? The idea that these protesters make a good point, but they execute the point in the wrong way, and then it disturbs what is, you know, a beloved sport, not just of kings, I know it's known as that, but of many, many, many people in this country and indeed in Ireland, and it wasn't done in the right way. It then eats up all of the police that are having to spend their time doing that rather than keeping people's space safe within the stadium. But, you know, it was still a lovely day out.
And you got 100 quid.
Yeah,
all
you're
the
better than
husband
Stephen.
did. I lost a tenner.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you feel like sharing...
Oh, bad luck.
What's happening in the show today?
OK. Well, we've got lots to come up, so I'm going to be speaking to Greg Hands, the Tory party chairman, about smart motorways and find out... I think the next question to ask, really, is, so you've deemed that they're not safe and you're not going to build any new ones. What happens to the old ones? I'm also going to be speaking to Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting. Really looking forward to this interview, because Wes has been quite tough on the unions and said in an interview with The Telegraph before Christmas, he was sort of saying, I'm going to take on the BMA. And I'm very intrigued to find out what figure he had put on the pay rise that he would plan to give both nurses and junior doctors if he is Health Secretary, as he hopes to be come the next general election. Going to be speaking about the local elections too. They're fast approaching along with the coronation. So May the 4th for the local elections, I'm going to be speaking to both Labour and the Conservatives about their chances. And I mentioned the coronation because, of course, there's lots of royal coverage in today's papers. And I'm going to be speaking to Robert Jobson, who's written a new book about the King, about that. And I think we'll have to discuss Harry and Meghan, won't we, guys?
I think afraid you might, Camilla. Lots to look forward to. A packed show coming up in just over 20 minutes. Thanks so much, Camilla.
Up next for you, we're going to be talking about Eurovision, and we're also going to be talking to Simon Calder, the travel guru, about the Orient Express and smart motorways. See you in a minute.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. The time is 9:14. You are watching Breakfast on GB News.
We have dragged Simon Calder in, basically to talk about the Orient Express. But before we get to that, seeing as he's here, let's talk smart motorways, should we? I was saying earlier on, nobody likes them. And I was saying, why don't they just switch them off?
Well, exactly, and I can tell you why they are not switching them off. So we've got the Sunday Times headline here, deadly smart motorways scrapped. And as you and your viewers have been saying, this couldn't come soon enough, victory for common sense, etc. But the thing is, smart motorways haven't been scrapped. Smart motorways will continue. 2 projects which are being worked on at the moment will come to fruition. Yes, there will quite rightly be better safety precautions going in, £900 million being spent on that. But they're not being scrapped because I'm afraid there is a really, really difficult series of choices to be made. If you absolutely want to cut the number of deaths, and very sadly an average of 5 or 6 people die on the roads of Britain every day, it's very straightforward. You double the price of fuel, you ban motorbikes, you don't let anybody drive till they're 25. Yeah. Those would all drastically reduce the number of deaths, but clearly they wouldn't be politically acceptable. When you don't go ahead with these schemes, what do you do instead? And the government is not doing anything, so therefore you are going to have less capacity on the motorway system. It is going to be less fast-flowing. Therefore, people will be diverted onto other roads which are significantly more dangerous. Some of them might take the trains, which is effectively as close as you can get to 100% safety. But there are consequences of these things, which is exactly why the government isn't retreating, doing what Liz Truss called for during the leadership campaign and scrapping them. So there are tough choices. There are implications of this decision. And are we going to build more motorways? Can we afford them? And do you want one in your backyard?
Yeah, it's trouble.
But those voices will continue, won't they, Simon? Because ultimately, 40 people have paid the ultimate price on
of course,
because they're dangerous.
Look, and in the Telegraph, you've got a very highly respected Edmund King, president of the AA, saying that people who develop these have blood on their hands. Absolutely scandalous the way that some of them have been run. And that is absolutely true, and my heart, like yours, goes out to the people who've lost loved ones. But the actual concept clearly isn't as badly thought out and as badly operated as people think. And with these new safety precautions, it wouldn't actually surprise me if, well, clearly 10, 15 years down the road, we'll then have autonomous vehicles and we'll have other difficult choices to make. Yeah. But simply saying they were a stupid idea by the Blair government, and why haven't they just all been got rid of? It's simply not as simple as that.
Right, OK.
So it's great to have you, Simon, to add some
clarify all
context
these
to all
things.
of this. Yeah.
I was going to say, let's talk about something lovely, as in the Orient Express, but actually it's not positive news, is it?
No. OK, let me tell you about the Orient Express. How long have we got?
Not long.
Right, the Orient Express was a 19th century train that ran from Paris mostly to Istanbul mostly. Made famous, of course, by Agatha Christie's fantastic novel and various films and so on. The Venice Simplon Orient Express is a private train run by an organisation called Belmond, which generally goes from sort of London to sort of Venice. And it's a wonderful trip. Lots of people have taken it. It uses rolling stock, which is almost a century old. You might be thinking, well, hang on, my local trains look that old. But the way that it works on this side of the channel is that you get on a luxury train to Folkestone. You then, unfortunately, get put on a bus and put through Eurotunnel, which slightly takes the glamour off things, and you pop up at Calais. And then you get on this beautiful train which is waiting for you, and you go to Paris, and you go all across the Alps, and you end up going through Verona and to Venice. Absolutely lovely. But unfortunately, the first bit, once we get the new entry-exit system that we asked to become subject to after Brexit, it won't work. They simply say, we have to keep a really tight schedule. We have to fit in with the national railways. We cannot take a 1-hour delay leaving Calais. We think that we could face such delays because everybody on that bus has to be photographed and fingerprinted, and therefore we're just going to scrap it, and you're going to have to get on a train and go to Lille instead, which won't be quite...
So they're not going to do the Calais?
They will carry on from Calais, yes, but they're just not going to do the bit in Britain because...
But that's not bad, is it? Because, I mean, it'd save a bit of money, wouldn't it? Just getting a quick ferry over to Calais.
Well, look, you're going to be getting on a Eurostar train, and it will be quite posh. They'll put you in the posh seats, but it's not the same as spending a couple of hours drifting through beautiful Kent in this train and really getting into the
spirit,
the Orient Express mood.
You can understand that decision, though, can't you, when you think back to the scenes that we saw at Dover just a couple of weekends ago, something like 14, 15 hours.
Well, absolutely.
And
even yesterday, coming back from Calais, there were warnings of 90-minute and 2-hour delays for coaches because everybody needs to be processed twice when you're coming back. Once by the French, because they need to stamp your passport, as we requested, and then once by the UK Border Force. And those sorts of delays are OK when you're coming back in from Orient Express's point of view, but they certainly don't work when you're going out. And actually, nobody knows what on earth is going to happen with the entry-exit system. We've said, and we want to be treated, as I've mentioned before, like people from Venezuela and Tonga. Yeah. We want to have our fingerprints taken every time we go to Europe. We want to have a facial biometric. And that takes time. And if you're going through somewhere like Eurotunnel or the Port of Dover, that's going to be quite tricky.
OK. Simon, good to see you.
Thank you very much,
It still
Simon.
doesn't put me off getting on the Orient Express.
No.
I'd love to do it.
I've got a picture of the interior here of one of the sleeping cars, and it looks like a stunning 19th century hotel.
I can just... Do you know what I can picture in that?
Me.
Stephanie Tetchy.
Oh.
Stephanie Tetchy.
We go together, Steph.
That sounds like a good dream.
That's you.
That is definitely on my bucket list. I was listening to everything you were saying, Simon.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's a bucket list item.
We talk Eurovision. So actually, I'm going to the London Eurovision party tonight.
Ooh, you're going to a party?
Acts are going to be performing.
Fabulous. Why didn't I get an invite?
Stephen should be taken.
I know.
I'm sorry, hard luck. You're not coming.
The glitz and glamour of it all.
What's going on with Eurovision?
Well, so for our representation, it's going to be May Miller who'll be representing the UK. She's going to be our entry with a song called I Wrote a Song, which is a song she wrote about her ex. But, you know, as with most of these contestants, the newspapers do a lot of digging into their past, and it turns out that May is quite a lefty, and she's made some controversial tweets in the past, including when Boris Johnson was hospitalised for COVID. She said he didn't deserve a bed on the ward. She's made comments about J.K. Rowling, labelling her as transphobic. So she's made various attacks on her Twitter, and we know the BBC have quite a big stance on, you know, their stars and their acts and how they handle their social media. So she's had a bit of a slap on the wrist from both her music label and the BBC ahead of the competition, and said that, you know what, just concentrate on the singing and be less about the politics.
She did in one post say, I hate this country.
Yeah, and that's
she's representing us.
And that's a problem because, you know, you want to, whoever's representing a country, you want to be in love with the UK and the country you're representing to the rest of Europe. So, you know, with most of these things, it's damage control, PR damage control, where they want her to appear like she's got a clean-cut image. But I'm sorry, I don't think we have this year someone who's, you know, a bit, you know, untainted in that sense when it comes to her views. So it'll be quite interesting to see how she does do next month.
It is a bit problematic, isn't it, when it is such a patriotic competition.
Yeah.
As you say, you do need to have that national pride.
Definitely, and I just feel like...
Good reading, doesn't it?
And, you know, the BBC and different music labels were the ones who selected her, so, to be honest, I think they deserve a bit of the blame as well. They could have done a bit more research to see who is being selected.
Let's talk Mia Farrow, because talk about being proud of Britain. We don't get the impression that Prince Harry is at the moment.
Yeah.
Mia Farrow has lost patience with him.
Yeah, she was forced to delete a tweet because earlier on this week she said, my unkind thought of the day is I'm getting a little bit tired of Harry and Meghan. And once she pressed send on that, there was a huge backlash from the Harry and Meghan squad who said that she's a fine person to talk about getting a bit tired because obviously she's had her own controversy in the public limelight for over 20 years between her and Woody Allen. So she's quite liberal, so I think people were quite shocked that she could make such a sentiment. But, yeah, she was forced to delete the tweet.
She didn't say anything. It's not controversial.
No, I think
it's stuck to her guns.
And to be honest, I think you could still like Harry and Meghan, but be tired of all the stories that come out of them. It is a bit of an overload, and I think the thing with Twitter these days, it's quite scary what you put out there, how the public can react to it, because people are quite sensitive these days, and she's not one to delete, so the fact she was.
I mean, you just know, don't you, with the Sussex squad? I mean, she probably knew if she posted that, she was going to get back. Exactly what happened. Can we just have a very quick word on Val Babe, lovely dame Deborah James, this documentary?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching this, Ellie. It comes out tomorrow, and it's basically going to be unseen footage of Deborah James talking about her battle against bowel cancer. And, you know, she was an inspiration to the whole nation, so it's going to be quite an interesting watch. She had so many milestones, including when she received her damehood from Prince William. So there's going to be a lot of things that this documentary is going to shed light on. And as well, you know, her Bowel Babe Fund has raised £11.3 million. So I can imagine it's going to get even more donations after this documentary.
It's going to be a bit of a tearjerker.
I think it'll be a tearjerker, but she was like the life and soul of the party. And so I think she always had a positive outlook. So I don't think this documentary will be as depressing as it sounds.
And that's how people will remember her, Stephanie, with a smile on her face.
Yeah.
Stephanie, thank you very much.
No worries.
And you have a smile on your face as well, yeah. Brilliant. Well, that's it from us. We've had a lovely weekend with you. We're back next weekend as well, but do stay tuned because up next is the Camilla Tominey Show.
Thank you very much, Stephen and Ellie. Well, good morning and welcome. This is the Camilla Tominey Show. We've got lots to come on the show today. I'm going to be speaking to Tory party chairman Greg Hands about next month's local elections, which aren't looking great for the Conservatives. I'll also be hearing from Labour's Wes Streeting about their plans for the NHS and dealing with the strikes. And hotel chain owner and Tory donor Sir Rocco Forte gives me his thoughts on how the Tories are doing for business. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on